The London system, one of the most hated openings by black players. I'm going to show you all the tactical plans, all the middle game plans on why black players hate this opening so much. I want you to watch the full video, use these in your games, and use it against anything that black throws back at you. Kicking things off in the 500 region, I'm going to be telling you guys everything that you need to learn about the London system. It's basically a setup, it's something that you can be using against anything that the opponent plays. It's more important for you to know the setup, know where the pieces belong, rather than knowing every move back to back. So knight c6 was played. We're going to play knight to f3 here. The thing about the London system is it's very easy to play. It follows the opening principles, and persons hate playing against the London, and people don't like the London system in general. I don't really like the London system because it's too easy to play, basically. So he plays bishop to g4, and as I'm saying, once you know the setup, you know where the pieces belong. This knight belongs on d2. The pawn goes to e3, the pawn goes to c3, the bishop goes to d3. If you could just know what I just said, you basically learned the London. Now, my opponent just played bishop g4 and then take on f3. Moving the same pieces more than once is not good in the opening stage of the game. Giving up a bishop for a knight is also not good in the opening stage of the game. Let's just take. Now, I still have the knight and the bishop on f3. The plan from here is to play pawn e3, bishop goes to d3, we castle the king, pawn goes to c3. It's just a setup. So let's play pawn e3. Black now needs to continue with development, knight f6, bishop d6. Those are the ideas. Knight f6 was played, not bad. I'm going to develop my bishop. Now I have all my minor pieces developed. The plan from here is just to get my king castled and then start focusing on getting my major pieces in the game. Now, if you're that person who is always like, okay, I'm always getting out of the opening stage of the game, okay, let's just castle the king, following principles. But then I don't know what to do in the middle game, and then I don't know how to create a plan, then this video should help you to do better on that. So for example, what do we do when we finish development? I'm basically saying, what do we do when all our minor pieces are developed? This is where we start thinking about our major pieces like our rooks, our queen. We want to, first of all, we want to connect the rook. So a move like queen to e2 would be good now. But second of all, we want to play moves like c4, pawn break. So being a London player, you're going to be playing moves like c4 or e4. Preferably e4 if possible, but he was covering the e4 square twice. I was only guarding it once, so e4 is not possible. D6 was played, not sure why. You don't want to be pushing pawns around your king like this. I guess it's because the bishop was pointing towards h7 and they were scared of some checkmating ideas. I don't really have anything happening right now. All I'm focusing on is to find my pieces that is not doing anything and put it on a better square. For example, this move, rook to c1. Rooks needs open file, and the c file is not yet open, but the possibility of me taking the pawn, opening the file for my rook is high. And if the opponent takes the pawn, once I take with the rook or the bishop, the c file is going to be open. Knight to b4 is not bad. I mean, he's trying to take my bishop, my a2 pawn is hanging, and generally we don't want to allow pieces on our half of the board. What I'm seeing in this position, though, is all I need to do is save my bishop, guard my pawn at the same time, because bishops are better than knights, and we have the bishop here in this position. So our goal is to open the position. The thing is, Black's knight on b5 is actually misplaced because it's not doing anything on b4. Yes, it's on my half of the board, but we're just going to be following the neutralization principle here. So he plays c6. Now we're just going to play a3, chasing the knight out of our half of the board. Plus, he's not going to be forced to put his knight on the edge of the board, which is something that you don't want to do, because once your knight is on the edge of the board, your knight is not as active as it should be. So knight back to a6 was played, puts the knight on the edge of the board. One move that I want you to play a lot, being a London system player, is knight to e5. Knight e5 is going to be a thematic move. I'm going to be talking about knight e5 a lot in this video because on e5, it's just a very strong knight. It's usually not easy for a pawn to just chase out the knight. And knight e5 allows you to get more pieces in the game. So if I want to play moves like bishop to h6, pawn to f4, and then start some attack on the opponent's king, then knight e5 will come in very handy. And that's actually what my plan is like. I actually have a very nice plan to start an attack and checkmate the black king. So this is something that you guys could be using in your London system as well. So bishop to d6 was played. Looks like he's trying to get rid of my knight, but I'm just going to be continuing with my plan. It actually would prefer to have a pawn on the f4 square instead of a bishop. So let's go bishop to h6, hit the rook, forcing the rook to move. Then I'm going to play the move pawn to f4. And what I'm trying to set up in this position is something called a rook lift, where I move my rook to f3 and then swing my rook over to h3 and then attack and target this weak h7 pawn. Okay, bishop takes e5. That's just a bad move because the rook is hanging. I mean, I could choose to take the rook, but I can also take the bishop because once I take the bishop, now the knight and the rook is hanging. So my opponent is still forced to lose material. If he moves the rook, we take the knight, we're ahead by a piece. If he moves the knight, we take the rook and we're ahead by an exchange. Now, this is usually what I see happening against the London. It's like persons don't really know how to play against the London. So they just play all these weird moves and then they make a blunder. So now let's just take the rook on f8. We're now ahead by an exchange. Usually, once we're ahead in material, we could start looking to trade pieces off the board. The knight on d7 is attacking my pawn on e5. The plan was to play pawn to f4, guarding the pawn on e5. I still have a plan of playing rook f3, rook h3, and targeting this h7 pawn. It all depends on what the opponent does, though. Knight c5, where's the knight heading? I think the knight is going to e4. And because I don't have any real forcing move that I'm able to play right now, I'm actually going to play the move queen to f3. Queen to f3 covers the e4 square. This is called prophylaxis, by the way. Now I cover the e4 square twice. He's covering it with the pawn and the knight. But if he puts the knight on e4, he only has one piece guarding the knight, and then I'm going to be winning a pawn. With that being said, my next move is to play pawn to b4, chasing away the only active piece that he has. So I want you guys to notice, even though he has no piece on my half of the board, this is the closest piece to my half of the board. He moves his rook to d8. Now we play pawn to b4, chasing the knight away. If he still puts his knight on the e4 square, we're just going to take, and that's an additional point for us. So the knight went back. This is what you guys want to see when you're playing your games. You want to be pushing back the opponent's pieces. Now I'm going to continue with my plan. Okay, I want to get the rook to f3. I could also play rook to d1 and just win a normal game. Thinking of pawn to b5 as well, but I don't want his knight to get back any access to the c5 square. I'm actually going to play pawn to g4. Now, a move like pawn to g4 comes with a lot of understanding because, for one, you don't want to be pushing pawns on the side that your king is on. So you have to understand that pushing pawns on the side that your king is on could be dangerous. But two, the opponent does not have any pieces that could possibly attack our king. My plan from here is I either want to play pawn to g5 and then just really attack h7, or pawn to f5, opening the position for my major pieces. The opponent just plays pawn to c5. Looks like another mistake because he wants me to take so that way his knight gets active, but by moving the pawn to c5 leaves the d5 pawn unprotected. So there's two options that I have here. Pawn to b5, hit the knight, or just take on d5. Because once I take on d5, if he takes, I could consider taking on d5, even though the rook is on the same line as my queen. That's something that I have to be aware of. I could even consider playing f5, but then it leaves this one unprotected. So I'm probably going to be taking on d5. He decides to take on b4 instead. That's a very interesting move. Yeah, now things are going to get spicy because my bishop is going to be active now. Look on this. First of all, I'm going to take on e6, hit the knight. If he takes back with his pawn, this is now called a weak pawn. There's no pawn that is guarding it. There's no pawn that is able to guard it. It's an isolated pawn. Taking this pawn allows my queen to get access to this diagonal. So that's already a pawn that I could capture. But I don't want to take this pawn because knight c5 hits my queen. So I'm going to play the move bishop to a2, attacking the weak pawn. Now I'm the one who is attacking. You always want to ensure that when you're playing, you're the one who is attacking. In chess, we call it the initiative. He still decides to play knight c5. I guess he's basically saying, my knight is guarding the pawn. I'm taking my knight off the edge of the board. I'm also guarding this pawn. But I know that the knight is guarding the pawn. So we're going to be using something called removing the guard. Taking on b4, attacking the opponent's knight, forcing the knight to move. Once the knight moves, not only the e6 pawn is going to be hanging, but this knight is also guarding the b7 pawn. So the b7 pawn will also be hanging. Knight to d3 was played. My rook is under attack. We have to be careful. But taking on e6 is still good because taking on e6 comes with check. So he's still not able to take my rook. And if I'm not wrong in this position, he should be losing a piece because the king has to go somewhere. He decided to put the king on g7. Now I'm able to play rook to d1. This is like a skewer because if he moves this knight out the way, it exposes this knight. And the moment he moves this knight, which he did, he took a pawn. Now I have two pieces targeting this knight. So that's already a free knight. However, whenever you're playing chess, if you see a good move, always look for a better one. Instead of immediately taking the knight, I'm going to take on b7, apply even more pressure on the knight. So I'm targeting the knight three times. He's only guarding it once. So even if he's able to add an additional defender to the knight is still dead. So we're not in any rush to take the knight. He decides to play the move queen to c5, not a bad move. He is also targeting my e3 pawn, but now we're able to play the move rook takes d7 with check, forcing his king to move. Well, his king is not going to move. He's going to take. Now we take, forcing the king to move. King to h6 is a checkmate. Pulling the king back to h8 could have also been a checkmate, but he decided to play king to f8, and that's also a checkmate. We're going to be playing the London system against 1100 rated players. Stick around. Our opponent is now in the 600 region. Let's play pawn to d4. More London system coming your way. Okay, pawn to f5 was played. This is called the Dutch defense, by the way. But the London system could still be played against the Dutch. The thing is, though, he plays this move and he's exposing the squares in front of his king, though. That's the thing. That's not the right thing to do, sir. Okay, that's fine. Let's just play the London system. Let's keep it London. Once he develops, we're just going to go with our normal setup. Knight comes out, our knight comes out. The pawn goes to e3. As I'm saying, the London system works against any opening that black plays. Pawn to g6 was played. We're still going to be playing London. Let's play e3. Bishop goes to d3. Knight goes to d2. King is going to get castled. If Jan us the bishop, let's develop our bishop. Okay, one thing I want to tell you guys about though is sometimes you may want to put your bishop on e2 if it's just pointing towards a pawn chain, but I'm still going to put my bishop on d3 here because I have some hopes of playing pawn to e4 in the future. But if you play something like pawn to d5 and I'm never going to be able to play e4, then the bishop could actually be better off on e2. Castle's the king. Let's castle our king as well. He's not playing too badly, he's developing his pieces. I'm also developing my pieces. He's also in the 600 level. So let's see when he's gonna make a mistake. Usually how the London system works is you just play normal moves and then it frustrates people because they don't know what to do against the London and then they blunder. So he did play pawn to d5, which means I'm never going to be able to play pawn to e4, but let's just play knight to d2 in this position because if you're okay, this is something thematic that I want you guys to keep in mind as well. If you're not able to play e4 in the London system, you could play c4. You just have to break somewhere because that's how we plan, right? Planning comes from breaking. Planning comes from pawn break. So he plays knight c6. Now we play pawn to c4 and we're doing fine. All our minor pieces has been successfully developed, which means it's time for us to get our major pieces in the game. We want to get our queen and both of our rooks in the game. Bishop to e6. Okay, he's developing. You could say he's applying some pressure to c4, but c4 is guarded twice, so I'm fine with that. So what should we do? We need to get our major pieces in the game. Now I'm going to play the move rook to c1 because the c file could be open. Like if he takes the pawn, I'm going to take and the c file is open. If I take the pawn, then it opens the c file. Okay, knight to e4. That's not a bad move. This is actually an annoying knight, but because I'm able to play pawn to f3, whether now or in the future, I'm not really threatened by that knight. So we're just going to continue with our regular ideas. Let's just go queen to e2 in this position. With that being said, we develop all our minor pieces. Our rooks are connected. My C rook is potentially on an open file. It's only my F rook that is not doing anything right now. And because it looks like the C file is going to be the only file to be open, I'm probably going to put both of my rooks on the file. And then he took on D2, which is not good. Like that was like his best piece. And look on this. Do some math with me now. He moves the knight one, two, three times. I only move my knight once. With that being said, he just wasted two moves. All I need to do now is just take back the pawn. So let's just take back the pawn. I'm still covering the c4 square twice. So the fact that he's attacking it twice is fine. He took on c4. Let's take on c4. And then if the bishop takes, my rook takes, the plan from there is just to double up my rooks on the c file. And, he's going to eventually make a blunder. All my pieces are doing perfectly fine, though. He traded bishops. Let's take on c4. And then he plays queen to d5. Not a bad move. He's attacking my rook. But we know that we need to get all our pieces in the game. So let's just play rook to c1 now. Now I have two rooks on this open file. My queen is on a nice square. My knight, my bishop is on a nice square. All my pieces has a job. Like when you're playing, you have to ensure that all your pieces has a job. Another thing that you guys need to notice is how this pawn on c7 is now unprotected. So if he's not careful, on the next move, I could just be capturing an unprotected pawn. Okay, he saw it. He guarded the pawn. Okay, what to do now? The move that I'm thinking of is rook to c5 to attack his queen. It looks like he's going to be able to take on a2. And I don't want him to be able to take on a2. Okay, instead of playing a passive move like a3, I'm actually going to play b4. It still threatens rook to c5 because now if he takes, my queen guards the square. But I'm also threatening to play pawn to b5, attack his knight, forcing his knight to move. And if his knight has to move, I'm going to have like three pieces targeting his pawn on c7. So he decided to play pawn to b5, and he was playing very well. I'm not gonna lie, but I want you guys to notice how his pawn was on b7. This is called the drawback principle. It was guarding the knight. Now it's no longer guarding the knight. And if you guys know how to count, you'll notice that I have two pieces attacking his knight on c6. He only has his queen. So once we take on c6, we're already winning. Now he plays rook to e8. It looks as if he wants to play pawn to e5. Pawn e5, I'm not scared of, to be honest. But I want to play rook c5 to chase away his queen, because I think I would love to set up a smothered mate here. It's like a 3% chance that the smothered mate is gonna work. But let's see. First, he has to move the queen. Once he moves the queen, we'll be able to tell. But then I also need to ensure that my queen is able to give a check on this diagonal. So a lot of different factors to consider. Queen moves to e4. That's not bad because now I'm able to go knight to g4, hits the queen, force the queen to move. The queen does not have good squares. The queen has to go back to b7. But let's play pawn to a4. This a4 move is just because I'm trying to set up the smothered mate and in order for the smothered mate to work, my queen has to be on this diagonal. But then if he plays pawn to e6, it's not going to work. So I'll probably just play knight to g5, hit the queen. He pulls the bishop back. Okay, he pulls the bishop back. There's no smothered mate here. So let's just beat him the natural way. The bishop is on the same line as my rook, so he wants to move his pawn. We spoke about this already. We're going to play the move knight to g5, attacking his queen. The only square that his queen could move to is back to b7. But then once his queen moves to b7, 600s, man, 600s. He didn't even move the queen. He plays pawn to e5. But before I take the queen, let's get my queen into the attack first. Let's play queen to a2 check, because if he plays king to g7, that could actually lead to a checkmate. So he has to play king to h8. And then if he plays king to h8, it could also lead to a checkmate. So he plays king to h8. I'm thinking of checking here. Checking here, if king goes here, that will lead to a checkmate. But if the king goes here, I check here. But then the king goes here. Okay, let's just take the queen. Let's just take the queen, and then once he takes back, bishop takes e5 could win his rook if I'm not wrong. I just wanted to find a very nice checkmate. So he took on c5. My knight is under attack, so let's just take on c5 again. But then he's gonna take my bishop. Okay, how are we gonna finish this off though? Okay, let's go knight to e6. We have to get our pieces in the game. The queen guards the knight, so I'm fine. My next plan is to get my rook to c7, so that way all my pieces surrounds his king. Knight takes c7 will also just be a fork, which is why he plays rook over. But let's just take with the rook. We're ahead in material. We want to trade anyways, but I'm also just trying to checkmate him at this point. So he took with the pawn. He did not take the rook. With that being said, let's play the move. Let's play queen to d5. Let's centralize the queen. I'm threatening to play queen to e5 followed by queen to g7. That's going to be a mate, which is why he took here. So now let's take. Let's attack the rook. He is forced to move the rook, and then it's going to lead to a checkmate. He moves the rook here, but already we have a fork. Queen to e8 check, hit the king, hit the rook. King has to move. We grab the rook. King has to move again. Is he going to put his king in the corner? He did put his king in the corner. I want to check him here, but then his king is going to run back. So I'm going to put my knight on e6. Now, once I check him here or even here, it's going to be a checkmate. There's nothing he could do to not get mate here, actually. Moves his king to h5, but that's just a checkmate. We're playing more London system against 700 rated players. Stick around. Opponent is now in the 700 region. We're still going to be playing more London system. d5, we go bishop to f4. It's the same exact setup. The knight is going to f3, knight c6. Let's go knight to f3. We're going to be playing moves like e3, putting the bishop on d3. You know the drill. He got both of his knights out. Let's go pawn to e3 here. Bishop to g4 is interesting. Eventually, we're going to be able to play pawn to h3 and just chase that bishop out. So let's just continue with our setup. Now we have 3 or 4 pieces developed, and sometimes knight to b4 hitting the bishop is annoying. So if I had played a move like pawn to c3 instead of playing bishop to d3, that would also be nice. But we're in the opening stage of the game. In the opening stage of the game, there's nothing crazy happening. He plays queen to d7 though. That's an indication that he may be castling on the queen side. Let's play pawn to h3. Let's chase away that bishop. He could pull the bishop back here. He could give up his bishop for a knight. He could also pull his bishop back to h5. Let's see. So the bishop went back to h5. He's basically maintaining the pin. Let's go knight to d2 now. Now all my minor pieces has successfully made a move. Once you move all your minor pieces, it's time to start getting your major pieces in the game. However, I have a nice little tactical idea in this position. Now here's what I'm going to do. First, I'm going to start with pawn to g4. And because I play this pawn to g4 move, I have to kiss castling on the king side goodbye. Once he moves his bishop, now I'm going to play the move bishop to b5, pinning the knight to the queen. And this was my whole idea. It's over. It's game over. The game has finished. Because once he plays pawn a6, attacks my bishop, we do not move the bishop because offense is the best defense. And I'm able to play knight to e5, hits the queen, pp on the pp, forcing the queen to move. And then once the queen moves, I'm going to take the knight, win the pawn on a6, and you guys could be seeing the end of the game already. So the queen went back to e8. We're going to take on c6, which attacks the rook. I think the best thing for him to do in this position is actually to take the bishop. Because if he takes the knight, I'm going to take here, and that could be leading to a mate. So he took on c6. Let's take on a6 with check. And then he puts his king on b8. That's crazy. Okay, so here's how we're going to end this game. Because the king is so exposed, we want our queen on the b3 square. Once we play queen to b3 check, he has to move the king, and that's going to be a checkmate. But the pawn is in the way. With that being said, all we need to do is move the pawn out the way. We could have also played pawn to c3, by the way, because now if he takes the pawn, I'm not able to play queen b3 because the pawn covers the square. But I should be able to play queen to a4 with the idea of playing queen to b4. He didn't take. He instead moved this king to a7, but I was also prepared for this one as well. What I'm going to do is play the move queen to a4, putting my queen on the same line as his king. With that being said, the moment I move my light squared bishop, his king is going to be in check. So the plan from here is to play moves like bishop to b5 check, forcing the king to move take on c6, which could either be trapping the queen or leading to a checkmate. But instead, he decided to play rook to b8, which means the king is not able to run to b8. So all I need to do is move my bishop to c8, and that's Wait, what? It's not mate. However, however, now once he puts his king on b6, it's a more beautiful pawn checkmate. We're going to be using the London system against 800 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is in the 800 region. We're still going to be playing d4. He plays d5. Let's just play our regular London system setup. Knight c6 was played. Let's just play knight to f3. Simple, regular stuff. He develops his bishop to f5. Let's play e3. The plan from here is moves like pawn c3, bishop to d3. He plays e6. Now, I'm going to play the move bishop to d3. If he takes on d3, my pawn takes back on d3, but he decides to pull the bishop back to g6. Now, I'm just going to get my king out the center of the board. So you could basically say that the setup is finished once my knight gets to d2. And from here, we could think about moves like pawn to e4 just to break open the center. Now, bishop to d6 was played. I like to play knight e5 whenever they play bishop to d6. But in this particular scenario, his knight is not on f6. So once I take with the pawn, I'm not going to be attacking his knight. So, one more idea to keep in mind is to just pull the bishop back to g3. The same way how he pulled his bishop back, we're going to pull our bishop back because we don't want to take on d6 and allow him to take. We want him to take on g3. So once he takes on g3, we're just going to take back with the pawn. Let's take back with the pawn. Everything is fine from here. If he takes, we could play queen takes followed by knight d2. Otherwise, we're going to play knight d2, queen e2, pawn to e4. Queen e7 looks like he wants to castle on the queen side, which we have no issue with. So let's continue with our regular London setup. He castles his king on the queen side, and we are still going to be attacking that king on the queen side. Now, to do this, we're going to play this move, queen to e2, because we have to keep our bishop guarded. Basically, what we want to do here is we want to open the c file for one of our rook. Okay, pawn to a6 was played. I'm immediately thinking about sacrificing my bishop, but I'm not going to have enough pieces in the attack to do that sacrifice. But if you're watching this video, don't be pushing pawns on the side that your king is on like that. Like, that's not going to help the position. Let's play pawn to c4 here. Why are we playing pawn to c4? Pawn to c4 is a pawn break. And keep in mind, pawn breaks is what we use to open the position. So if he had taken, it would have opened the c file. Since he didn't take, I could take and open the c file. But remember, we're also not in any rush to do anything. He could play this move knight b4. He could take the bishop, then play knight b4. Both of those moves are annoying. So let's just play pawn to a3. But it's not just a defensive move. I'm still trying to play moves like b4 to start my attack. Notice how he plays h5 because he wants to start his attack on my king. I'm going to play b4 because I want to start my attack on his king. And keep in mind, the whole idea whenever there are opposite side castles in chess is to start an attack by launching the pawns forward. So he took on c4. Now let's take with the bishop actually. Like, this sacrifice looks like it makes a lot of sense now, especially if I'm able to sack and put my rook on c1. So he plays knight to e4. That's fine. Doesn't do a lot. If he takes, my knight takes. If he goes here, well, he's not going to be able to go here because I'm going to play the move rook to c1. Now my rook is on the same line as his king. He took on d2. The sack is coming. Let's take back on d2 with the knight. The sack is coming if he's not careful. And this is why you don't push pawns on the side that your king is on. Okay, so he pushes this pawn. I'm thinking, if I take now, what if he ignores it and then take here? Am I able to checkmate him before he checkmates me? Check. King takes, check. King back takes. That's a bit too risky, to be honest. Let's just play pawn to g4. I want you guys to notice what I'm doing. I just don't want his pieces to get too much access towards my king. So if I could keep his rook behind this pawn, that would be good. Same thing here. If I sack, maybe he takes, and that's going to help him. So we're going to play g3, keeping the rook behind the pawn. And if he plays pawn to h2 check, it's not as dangerous as it looks. His h2 pawn is actually helping our king to be safe. Okay, but then he decides to play pawn to e5. That had nothing to do with the attack. I guess he just doesn't, or he just didn't see that a sack is coming. But let's sacrifice the bishop. If he takes here, I'm probably going to sacrifice my bishop again. But if he takes my bishop, my queen swoops in with check, and he's going to lose his knight. So we're predicting a checkmate very, very soon here. He accepts the sacrifice. Let's take on a6 with check, forcing the king to move. He now has to move the king to either b8 or d7. He chose to put the king on d7. Okay, I'm not able to mate, so let's take the knight with check. I have two pieces covering the square. The king has to go back. How do we checkmate from here? That's the question. I found it. I found it. What should we do when we're attacking? We should bring more pieces in the attack. That's where knight c4 comes in, right? Now, knight c4, let's say he checks. It's very important that we look on the opponent's forcing moves. If he check, I go king here. And he's not able to check because my queen guards the square. So let's play knight to c4. And I'm actually threatening checkmate in two moves in this position. I was expecting pawn h2. Let's just move the king. The queen protects the square. Okay, so he still decided to check on e4. So we're just going to take the bishop for free. That's just free. And I think I'm still threatening knight to b6, which will lead to a checkmate on the a8 square because my rook is on the same line as his king. And the good thing is, he's not able to check my king on the next move. He plays rook to d7, makes it even quicker. His king is no longer able to escape, which means that's just checkmate. More London system against 900 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now in the 900 region. We're going to be playing the London system. Let's put our faith in the London life. That's what Tucci says, right? Let's go. So he plays knight to f6. Let's just continue. Bishop to f4 here. And then he plays d5. Now we're just going to continue with our setup. Let's just go knight to f3. It's the regular London setup. Pawn goes to e3, bishop goes to d3, regular stuff. He develops his knight. Let's just go e3 in this position. We know exactly what's happening here. Pawn to g6. That's an interesting move. He's basically just trying to fianchetto his bishop. Well, let's just continue with the London system. He fianchetto the bishop. And one thing I want you guys to keep in mind is a knight going to b4 could be annoying. So let's just play pawn to c3 to prevent that. We're continuing with the London. And then one more thing I want you guys to keep in mind is a knight going to h5 is annoying to attack the bishop. So we're going to play the move pawn to h3, preventing the knight from going to h5. Not necessarily preventing the knight, but if he still puts the knight on h5, then we pull the bishop back to h2. So after e6, let's go knight to d2. This is the regular, typical London system setup. And then he's going for a double fianchetto. He's fianchettoing a second bishop. Let's castle the king. Now, after you finish your London system setup, your goal should be to get your major pieces in the game. Usually you get your major pieces in the game by the use of pawn breaks. But before I play e4 in this position, I'm just going to play, oh, that was a slip. That was a slip. He wanted to play queen to e2, followed by rook to e1. Okay, that's fine. He plays rook to e1. We're still going to be e8. We're still going to be able to play e4. And then after takes, my bishop or my queen could also take. Actually, let's take with the queen so that way I could put my queen back on e2. I'm also aware that I'm putting my queen on the same diagonal as his bishop, but there's not much that his knight could do, basically, which is why he guarded the bishop because his bishop was unprotected. But now that his bishop is protected, we're just going to pull our queen back to e3. And the reason why I chose e3 over e2 is because bishop to h6 is usually some ideas that comes in the London system. Not necessarily the London system, but once they fianchetto their bishop, you want to play a move like bishop to h6 to target the fianchettoed bishop. So he plays a5. Now we're just going to be continuing with the plan. Let's go bishop to h6. Usually, to react to bishop to h6, they need to play bishop to h8 to keep control over the dark squares. They should not just play normally and allow me to take or something like that. But my next two moves is just to get my rooks in the game. Taking on h6 is usually very, very bad, by the way, because once the queen takes, I'm now targeting the h7 pawn. My threat is to play knight to g5, which could lead to a checkmate. And him playing pawn to e5 shows that he's not seeing, he's not sensing what's happening. So let's just hit him with knight to g5 in this position. I'm actively threatening checkmate in two moves. There's nothing he could do to prevent me from checkmate, well, from checking him on h7. It's not necessarily going to be leading to a checkmate. All he needs to do is guard the f7 square, but it's completely losing because his king is going to be on the run. So he moves his queen to d7, guarding the pawn as we spoke about. Let's take on h7. That's a check. The king is now forced to move to f8. Now, if I check here, the king moves here, and I don't really have anything. I would love to take here, but the queen guards it. So if I could find a way to get rid of the queen, that would be good. But then I noticed that his queen is on unprotected piece, and the queen is on the same line as my queen. So I could get away with the move. Bishop takes g6 in this position. And now I have three pieces guarding, attacking f7. He only has two pieces guarding f7. If he takes, I take his queen, and I'm completely winning. And I am threatening to play bishop takes f7, capturing his pawn on f7. Okay, he took on g6. Let's just take the free queen. Putting the queen back on f7 could be a checkmate. So he has to defend against this. I'm assuming he's gonna play rook to e7. Like he has to find rook to e7 here. He did find rook to e7. Okay, we have to move the queen. Let's just move the queen. Let's just go back to g4. This is completely winning though. If I could get one more piece in the attack, that would be nice. So even though he takes, we're not going to take back. We're just going to play rook to e1 just to get more pieces in the attack. And he's trying to trade the pieces off the board, which I'm kind of fine with, but I'm also trying to deliver a checkmate. So let's just play knight to e6 check. If he plays rook takes, my rook takes on e6 and I'm winning. If he moves the king, I'm going to start working some magic with my queen. So he moves the king. Looks like he's trying to take here. Let's give a check on f4, forcing the king to move. The king is not able to move here, so he had to go back. I'm thinking of playing queen to h6, but then I lose the knight, which is why I'm going to play queen to f6. I'm guarding my knight, and I'm also threatening to take on g6, which could lead to a checkmate. He took another pawn, guys, just capturing material. Let's take on g6 with check. He now has to move his king over to h8. And then what do we do from here? We bring more pieces in the attack. Hit him with a move like rook to e4. Now tell me, how will he possibly prevent me from playing rook to h4 mate? And if you say he's going to play rook to h7, preventing my rook from going there, his rook is guarding his rook on e8. So if he moves his rook, taking on e8 is going to be a checkmate. He moves the rook to h7. Once we take on e8, that's just a checkmate. More London system against 1011 players. Our opponent is now 1000. Let's go d4. More London system coming your way. So he decides to play c6. This is a sign that this guy's a Caracan player. But as we spoke about, I want you guys to be closing your eyes playing the London system. Like, this is how easy the London system is. You know, for all the persons out there who don't want to be doing any opening prep and you're lazy and all, this is the opening for you. He plays d5. Now we could play e3, we could play knight f3, you know, it's the same thing. Let's just play e3. Like, all I want you guys to do is to remember the setup. That's what you need to remember. Like, especially at the lower level, the order in which you play the move is not important. The setup is more important than the move order. With that being said, where does the pieces belong? Those are the questions that you should ask. So, for example, this pawn goes to c3, the knight goes to d2, the knight goes to f3, the bishop goes to d3. Once you play the setup like this, you're fine. So we know that the bishop goes to d3, so let's develop the bishop. The pawn goes to c3, the knight goes to f3, the knight goes to d2, we castle the king. So he decided to play bishop to g4 in this position. I could play f3, chasing away his bishop, but let's just play knight to f3. We're just sticking with our setup. We're going to play knight d2 next. He plays e6. Basically, what he's doing is he's taking his bad bishop outside of the pawn chain. Let's just go knight to d2 here. Similar stuff. Pawn to c3. This is when I want you guys to play c3. So whenever they play moves like c5, that's when I want you guys to play pawn to c3, because you have to ensure that you keep your center intact. And more than likely, when they take on d4, you're always going to play e takes. So that way your rook enjoys the open file. Now, h3 is also a very thematic idea in the London system. For example, bishop to e7, we could castle here. Sometimes we have to ensure that we're on the lookout for moves like knight to h5. And then if you're a London system player, when they play knight h5, you want to pull your bishop back to h2. So after bishop to e7, let's play h3 first. Now, assuming he pulls the bishop back or just take, giving up his bishop for a knight, let's just take back, castle the king, and it's London system. This is the setup. This is what you want to be seeing as a London system player. And then after this is where the plans and the ideas comes in. So first plan is a knight on e5. You know, if you're a London system player, just always just lodge your knight on the e5 square. So he plays h6. Maybe he's trying to prevent something from going to g5. I had no intention of that. Let's just lodge the knight on the e5 square. And to start a kingside attack when you're playing the London, you could try to play moves like queen to f3. You know, there will be some sacrificial ideas on h6. Now, typically persons say the London system is boring. You know, there's no piece flying left and right. But if you're lazy, then you know this is what you get. So he plays knight to d7. He's applying some pressure to my knight. Not afraid of that. I think from here, I just need to bring pieces in the game. Honestly, I'm thinking of queen to f3. I just like the f3 square for my queen. I like the idea of bringing more pieces over to his king. Like, regardless of the opening that I play, the my middle game plan will always be the same thing. So he took on d4 here, and as we said, we're always going to be taking with the e pawn once they take. Taking with the c pawn opens the c file. It doesn't mean it's bad or you're losing or anything, but just take with the e pawn. Now it's going to be very easy for us to get to a rook on the e file. And usually the plan for black players here is to try to play moves like, you know, rook b8, b5, b4, but it's usually so hard because the moment this pawn moves, there's some knight c6 ideas. If a rook goes to b8, the bishop covers the b8 idea. So it's just nice for me here. Look on my pieces. Look on how my pieces are pointing towards this king. So he took on e5, and there's one more thing that I want you guys to know, being a London system player. It seems very counterintuitive, by the way. But when they take on e5, if you could play pawn takes e5 and attack their knight, you should do it. And the reason why I say it's counterintuitive is because you could say you're killing your bishop, but we actually want our bishop to be pointing towards here more than how it's pointing towards here. So once the knight moves, it gives us a lot of attacking ideas and a lot of attacking plans. We have two bishops pointing towards the guy's king. Like, I'm thinking of sacrificing something. Bishop takes, okay, no sacrifice is going to work here actually, because bishop to g5 is coming. And once he finds bishop g5, he's just trading the pieces off the board and then he's fine. Let's just bring more pieces in the game. Like, our rooks are not doing anything. Let's play rook to e1 first, just so that way this pawn is fine. And then I'm gonna play rook to d1, putting my rook on the same line as his queen. I don't want to like rush any attack and then the attack doesn't work. So I'm just gonna ensure that my development is good. So he did find bishop to g5, and I'm thinking of like I could take, if we take or allow him to take, it really simplifies the position. And again, you know, the reason why you're watching this is because you want simple positions. So that's fine. But personally, I'm going to pull my bishop back to h2 because I know that you could say you could use the word compromised. His bishop is compromised on the g5 square. Even though it looks active and it looks like it's doing something, the moment I play pawn to f4, he is going to be forced to move the bishop. So for now, I'm just going to ensure that every single piece that I have on the chessboard is playing a role. Knight c5, very good move. There's nowhere we're giving him this light squared bishop. We're the only one with a light squared bishop. He doesn't have a light squared bishop. So this light squared bishop could possibly be the piece that helps us to win the game. Now remember, guys, we want to play moves like f4, f5. This is how our attack is going to come in. We want to get to a rook on this d file as well. Okay, he pulls the knight back. That was weird. Like, why would you play knight c5 just to pull the knight back to d7? That's just wasting time. Let's just get to a rook in the game. Now both of our rooks are in the game. Queen to d3 would have threatened that checkmate. That could have been something. And then after g6, we play f4. And one thing I want you guys to keep in mind, like whenever you're threatening a checkmate on the opponent's king, you don't necessarily have to see it as a cheaper. You know, like because you want the opponent to be moving pawns around their king. If you could get them to move the pawns around their king and weaken their king, then you are in good shape. Now, he plays queen to b6. And as I said before, I want to be able to play pawn to f4. The queen on b6 is pinning my pawn here, though he is also attacking b2, but I'm not afraid of that. Let's go queen to e2 here. Queen to e2 indirectly guard the b2 pawn. The b2 pawn is now poisoned because if the queen takes, he's going to lose his queen. So the move that, okay, he did take, like, I actually wasn't trying to trick the guy, but he did take a pawn. This is what happens when you're greedy. It's the game is actually over now. This is called a discovered attack, where the queen is unprotected. My queen is on the same line as his queen. We move the bishop away with check. Remember, forcing moves on the opponent's half of the board. The king now has to react to this check by taking. Now we grab the queen, and this is just completely winning. It's crazy how being a London system player, this should be your strategy. Play normal move, wait on them to blunder, then punish them for their blunder. And you don't get to do a lot of opening work. Personally, I still think all of you guys who play the London system is lazy, but hey, if it's working for you, knock yourself out. So he plays f6. Now we're just gonna try to finish off the game. Let's take the free pawn on b7. Let's attack the opponent's knight. Maybe he moves the knight, maybe he doesn't. Both of our rooks are now active. Okay, he took on e5. Let's take. I'm actually thinking of sacking my rook just to set up a checkmate here. Like sack the rook, take here. How does he prevent the mate? If bishop f6 I takes, rook takes doesn't work. If he plays rook to g8, I still take. Because then if he takes, I take. But then he has this. Okay, let's just play the normal move. Let's just play the normal move. After he takes, my rook takes. Like I'm expecting him to resign in a few moves. Bishop h4, apply some pressure here. We're not afraid of pressure there, by the way. So let's just take on e6. We're actually trying to get to his king. And when you have these types of position, the goal is to get both of your major pieces on the seventh rank. So let's see what he plays. Rook to e7 is my plan. Rook takes is also my plan. So bishop g6, let's play rook to e7. Now I have two pieces on the seventh rank. He has to play rook to g8 in this position, which is it's a very ugly move to play. It's not a move that you would want to play. So he did play rook to g8, and already rook takes g7 is winning. Because after rook takes, I could take his rook, and that's better. But what if I just take here, try to set up some checkmate over here? Yeah, let's do it that way. Let's take here. There's a lot of ways to win, and I'm trying to find the more precise way to win. You know, I'm not just trying to take all his pieces off the board and then promote a pawn and then win, which is also fine. I'm trying to win precisely. For example, another way to win this game is just to take the rook. If I take the rook, rook takes, it's two rooks versus a bishop, which means it's just completely winning. However, okay, how am I going to do this? Okay, we're going to check on f5. Check. He's not able to block with the pawn, so the king has to go here. If I'm able to sacrifice a rook on h6, then h7 is going to be a checkmate. If I takes, he has rook takes, and then my back rank becomes a bit weak. Okay, let's actually take it. Let's take. And then after he plays rook takes, I'm going to play queen to g4. I'm threatening a checkmate on g7, and I'm protecting my back rank. And I'm also attacking his bishop. So you could say I'm winning his bishop because the rook has to go to g. Okay, he decided to save the bishop instead of checkmate, which means that's just a checkmate. We're going to be playing more London system at the 1100 region. So stick around. Our opponent is now in the 1100 region. More London system coming your way. B5, we play bishop to f4, same exact setup. Remember, when it comes to the London system, I'm not saying that move order is not important, but the setup is more important than the move order. Know where the pieces belong. He develops his knight. Knight f3 or e3 are both good moves here. Let's choose to play knight to f3 first in this one, and e3 is coming next. Bishop d3 is coming after. Knight d2, pawn c3, castle that. That's the London system in a nutshell. You get to follow all the principles without thinking about it, and you get your pieces out without blundering. He develops his other knight. Let's play pawn to e3 here. We're going to be playing the London system. It's the regular setup. He develops his bishop. Now, whenever the bishop goes to f5, we're still going to play the move bishop to d3. It really doesn't matter if he takes. We could choose to take with the queen if we want very quick development, but we could also take with the pawn. So that way, once you take with the pawn, you basically open the c file for free and you prevent his knight from going to the e4 square. So now he plays pawn to e6. Let's get our king out the center of the board. We're just following our setup at this point. And then after this bishop to d6 move, we're going to play one of the first thematic moves in the London system, which is knight to e5. If you're a London system player, your knight belongs on the e5 square. The whole idea is once they take on e5, we're actually going to take with the pawn. And once we take with the pawn, it attacks their knight, which forces one of the main defensive pieces away from the king side. Then we get to start our attack. He decided to castle his king. Let's go knight to d2. We're just sticking with the setup. We could play knight to f3 as well, just having both of the knights supporting each other. And my next move is just to play rook to c1. It's like, what piece do I have that is not doing anything? Let's just put it on a better square. And again, this is what I tell you guys about with the London system. The guy just plays knight to h5. People just blunder when they play against. Let me tell you what's wrong with the London system. I don't like the London, by the way, but the London system, they find it so annoying. It's just drawn, it's just boring. They don't play against it properly and then they just blunder. That's just a free night. No, I'm just gonna take the free night. It's crazy. It's just completely winning here. Now we're actually gonna start our attack on the king and we have an extra piece. And the reason why I say I don't like the London system is not because something is wrong with the London system, because Magnus Carlsen says the London system is reliable. I just prefer someone who works hard, you know? And the London system, it's just such an easy opening to learn. You just play all of these moves, and all of a sudden, you don't have to know anything else about chess. Anyways, he's trading. I mean, technically, I want to trade because I'm ahead in material. Like on a natural day, we play pawn takes, hit the bishop, gain the tempo, but we're ahead by a piece. Let's take with the bishop in this position. Plus, another idea that I want you guys to keep in mind when playing the London is some f4, rook f3, rook h3 ideas. That's a nice idea as well. But he's attacking my knight. So let's just move the knight to f3. The bishop is on our half of the board. So we are going to be chasing away that bishop very, very soon. Our rooks are the only pieces that is not taking part in the game. So we will put our rooks in the game as well. Pawn to f6 attacks the bishop. I have to move. Let's just pull it back to g3. We're ahead by a piece in this position. So we're not in any pressure to win this game. We're just going to do it the regular way. We're doing it the London system way. Rook to c1, bringing our pieces in the game, the boring way. Like, what piece is not doing anything? Put that piece in the game. Pawn to a3 is coming because one of the principles that we know about is the neutralization principle, which says do not allow pieces on your half of the board. The thing is, after pawn a3, I don't really gain much from it, and I'm not really scared of his bishop, but it is coming eventually. He guards the pawn. The rook on f1 is the only rook that is not doing anything. Do we play rook to d1? No, because you don't want to have your rooks pointing towards your own pawns. So we're going to play the move rook to c2, doubling up the rooks on the c file. Queen to b5 was played. It's not a terrible move. He is attacking an unprotected pawn. Now there are two pieces in my half of the board, so I have to be just, well, not in my half, but this is in my half. This is pointing towards my half. So we still have to pay attention to both of them. I'm thinking of playing queen to g5, just hit him with the good old offense is the best defense. But then he has pawn to f5. Okay, I have a little idea, but I think I have to play rook to c1 first, doubling up my rooks on the c file. If he takes my pawn on d3, though, I'm not necessarily going to be taking on c7, and he also pull his bishop back to a5, which is a very nice move because he guards the pawn. But, okay, no buts. I wanted to play rook to c5 because the queen and the bishop is on the same line, but I'm thinking of queen takes b2, and then if I take his bishop, he takes my rook, so no buts. My pawn is still under attack, but I don't want to play a passive defensive moves. Like, you guys know me. So how do I navigate this? Okay, let's play pawn to e4. Pawn to e4 is a very nice move. First of all, it's a pawn break. Taking on e4 is bad, but we are playing the London system, and I think the London is cursed. Like, people just blunder against you when you play the London. So I'm expecting him to blunder the queen. But if he does not do that and he still decides to take on d3, which he did, now I have two pieces targeting this d5 pawn. So I didn't have to sacrifice a pawn in this position. So let's just take on d5. And again, if he takes on d5, his king is exposed. I tell you guys about the London system. His king is exposed. His bishop is unprotected. Now I take on d5. Hits the king, hits the bishop, and we're winning another piece. Yo, this is crazy. He moves the king. Let's take the bishop. We're now ahead by two entire pieces. In this position, we're just looking for the trades. Like all the trades are just good in this position. Now, pawn to b6 attacks my queen. That's an unprotected pawn. Let's just take the pawn. Now all my pieces are targeting his c pawn. He plays rook to a8. Let's just take another free pawn. And if he dares to take on c2, his back rank is going to be too weak, and he's going to be losing in the weirdest way. So he did take on a2. So here's what's about to hit him. First of all, that's an unprotected rook. I also want to play rook here, but then he's just going to move his rook. And then if I take, king takes, check, king up, check, and then the king runs. So that does not work. So let's just play queen to e7 first. Let's just attack the rook. With that being said, anywhere he puts the rook, that's going to be a mate. So he has to play the move rook to g8. But I also have to be a bit careful about my back rank because he is also threatening. Okay, he plays king to g8 instead. King to g8 instead. This is mate. It's over. It's GG's. His g7 pawn is weak. We spoke about the fact that we need to. Oh boy, there's so many ways to win this. Because after king to g8, his king and his rook is on the same diagonal. That's a rook. But I want to play rook to c7 first though, because we know the idea. When you see a good move, look for a better one. If I play rook to c7 first, the idea of queen to c6 is still there. I am now telling him that he has to find queen check, and then I'm just still going to win his rook. So let's play rook to c7 in this position. Queen to g7, checkmate, is now the threat. He has to find queen to g6, then we're going to pick up his rook, and we're going to be winning the game. I guess that's why people say the London is annoying because you're playing against the London. It's just this weird setup that you can't just immediately follow your plan. And then the moment you mess up, there's some tactical ideas lurking around in the position. I still don't like the London though. I still don't like the London. So he plays rook to f7. He's just trying to speed up the process a bit. There's so many ways to do a checkmate here. Like I could take the rook, the king has to move, and then queen takes g7 is going to be a checkmate. But I could also play rook to c8 check because now, well, he resigns. We're going to be playing more London system against 1200 rated players. Stick around. Opponent is now in the 1200 region. It's more London system. Okay, he plays g6. Looks like he's trying to play a King's Indian. Let's continue with our regular London setup. He plays bishop to g7. Let's continue. Let's go knight to f3. Then he plays c6. I guess the pawn is going to d5. Okay, let's continue. Let's go pawn e3, pawn d6, bishop to d3, just developing, bishop to g4. Okay, I think this is called the check perk or something like that. It's a decent line to play. So, but let's keep developing. Let's just keep developing. Now we have all four of our minor pieces are now developed, by the way. This bishop that is on g4 will be kicked with h3. He develops his knight. Let's kick the bishop. Usually what they do in this position is they take on f3. I actually have a video where I was actually playing with the black pieces and I play with this setup. So it's actually very, very similar to a perk. If he takes, then my knight is just going to take. I'm going to castle the king, and it's just going to be a normal game. Oh, he did not take. He pulls the bishop back to e6. I was not expecting that move. Okay, let me just get my king out the center of the board. And then he plays knight to d7. Hmm. Knight g5, I like. Get rid of the bishop. Let's just play e4. Let's play e4. Our development is complete. I'm trying to create some space for my major pieces here. And he also has to be careful not to get his bishop trapped because I could play moves like c4 followed by d5, and that could get his bishop trapped. So he castles the king. Let's go queen to e2 here. My rooks are now connected. Then he plays knight to h5. And this is one of the main reason why we want to play h3 in the London system, by the way, because of these annoying knight h5 moves. So whenever you see them play knight h5, just pull your bishop back to h2. And then now the knight is just looking ugly on h5 because eventually it has to go back to f6 unless he's planning on going crazy with some moves like f5. So he plays d5, targeting the center. If I takes, maybe he's gonna play pawn takes. I'm not sure how that helps my position. So let's just keep the tension. Or we could play e5 because there's a trick. His knight is now trapped. His knight has no squares to go. So in order to not lose the knight, he had to create an escape for the knight. That did not create an escape for the knight. However, if I push, he takes, I takes, the knight gets the square. If I push, he takes, I take the knight, he push. Or I take. Yeah, I think it's best if I just take. Because his bishop is unprotected, which means he has to take with the rook. And if he has to take with the rook, then I hit him with g4 because the knight is still trapped. And if he tries to put the knight on the f4 square, my bishop takes on f4. And if the rook takes my bishop, it leaves his bishop unprotected. I think we're winning a piece here. So he took with the rook. We saw this. This is why you do not put your knights on the edge of the board. Pawn to g4. And whenever you're about to make moves like these, pushing pawns on the side that your king is on, ensure that you're aware of the fact that you're slightly weakening your king. Knight goes to f4. Let's take the knight. We spoke about this. And then once the rook takes, there's nothing guarding the bishop. So we take the bishop. His king is in check. He has to move the king out of check. Once he moves the king out of check, I'm thinking knight g5, threatening some knight f8 ideas. So he moves the king to h8. Now we play the move knight to g5. And there's actually a lot of threats here. I'm actually threatening knight f7. I'm threatening knight takes h7 followed by queen takes g6. Let's see how he responds to this. Because this could get very, very weird. Like very, very weird. Okay, he plays queen to g8. And that's not a smothered mate if you're about to comment. I'd appreciate if you leave a comment on the video, by the way. But by moving the queen to g8, he is leaving the knight unprotected. This is called the drawback principle. So let's just grab the knight. And the likes and comments, they go a far way, by the way, because I'm sure you guys see the amount of work that we're putting in these videos. So just reaching over, liking the screen, roasting me in the comments also help. No need to say something nice. You could roast me as well. Now we're ahead by 6 points. Knight is going to e6, hits the rook, hits the bishop. It's just GG's. But then he decides to play rook to f8. That's a fork, sir. Because now we hit both of the rooks at the same time. And by the way, guys, the reason why I'm able to always spot these forks is because I have good pattern recognition. It's like it's not the first or the second or the third or the 100th or the 200th time that I've played a night fork. I've probably played a night fork or seen the different types of night fork patterns probably 10,000 times without exaggerating. With that being said, training your pattern recognition, doing the same types of tactics over and over again, trying to do them quicker each time will help you to get better at chess. So he took a pawn on d4. His pieces are still forked. Yeah, this is so winning. There's just so much ways to win this game. Okay, his rooks are still forked. Well, let's get rid of one of the rook. My f2 pawn is actually under attack. There's a lot of pieces attacking me on f2. One, two. Once he takes with the queen, it's gonna be three. And I only have one defender on my f2 pawn. Rook takes, queen takes, check. Okay, he has no mate. That's the good thing. There's no checkmate on my king. So he took with the queen. Rook takes, I'm not able to prevent. And after rook takes, I'm going to take. So let's guard the knight. I have to guard the knight. I'm not going to lie. This would be the craziest thing if I'm ahead by 7 points and mess this up. Rook takes, queen takes king over, queen here, maybe check takes, and then pull the queen back. Yeah, let's go rook to d1. I have to guard the knight because once he plays rook takes, queen takes, king over, he's not going to have any more checks, but the queen would have been attacking the knight. But once I play rook d1, the queen now keeps the knight guarded. So, okay, he decided to play bishop takes. Let's just play king to g2 in this position. Okay, now he pulls the bishop back to h4. If I takes, queen takes, he wants to put the queen here, which is why I'm not going to take. I'm going to play knight to f3, attacking the bishop. The plan is to swing my rook in the game. I also want to play moves like c4. I just want to trade some pieces off the board, but I have to be careful how I trade. So if I have to get rid of a piece, I would need to get rid of the bishop first. Then I get rid of the rook. H5 was played. Guy left his bishop unprotected. That's just a free bishop. And the good thing is, once I take the bishop, I will be threatening a royal fork on G6. So let's take on H4. So taking on F1 is not good. That's a threat. How does he prevent that threat? Not sure. He took royal fork. My fellow viewers, I'm forking all three of his most important pieces. And then once the king move, we grab the queen and it has to be GG's. And my opponent finally resigns. Let's play the 1300 guy. Our opponent is now in the 1300 level. More London system coming your way. So knight to f6, we're still going to play regular London system. Let's just develop our bishop to f4. As we said, once we know the setup, it's easy. Pawn to d5. Let's develop our knight to f3. This is where the pieces belong in the London. This is where you put the pieces. After pawn to e6, we're going to play pawn to e3. The bishop goes to d3. The knight goes to d2. Now, whenever you see them play this early bishop to d6, there's a lot of ways in which you could do this actually. I really like the knight e5 idea. Like I like to play knight e5 when you play the London. It's like just put the knight on e5. It's a very annoying piece, by the way. And if he takes, he's giving up his bishop for a knight early. And even if he develops one of his other knights, my knight is going to be safe on d3. So he plays c5, he's targeting d4. This is usually an indication when you should play pawn to c3, covering your d4 pawn, even though once they take on d4, we're always going to be taking with the e pawn. If something like knight to c6 is played, you don't necessarily need to play bishop to b5 and play aggressive. I mean, you wouldn't be playing aggressive if you chose the London system anyway. So he plays queen to e7. Let's just continue with our setup. Let's go bishop to d3. I'm trying to castle my king. The knight is going to d2. Regular London system stuff. So he plays knight to d7. There's two pieces attacking my knight, but my knight is guarded. So now I'm either going to castle my king or develop my knight. It doesn't really matter which one I do first, by the way, but let's just develop the knight so that way I have good control over the e4 square. So now I don't have to worry about a knight coming to e4, and then I can always castle my king on the next move. So as I'm saying, the order in which I do these moves isn't as important. If you understand the setup, if you know where the pieces belong, then it's going to be easier for you to say, okay, a piece belongs there, let me put a piece there, which is why, the guy just played knight e4. It's like he's listening to what I'm saying and then he's doing the opposite. Because why did I even play bishop to d3 in the first place? I just wanted to ensure that he's not able to play knight e4. This is just counting, elementary stuff. How many pieces do I have on the e4 square? One, two. How many pieces does he have on the e4 square? One. Elementary stuff. Now, I'm thinking of takes, bishop takes, but then pawn f6 is kind of weird. And there's also tactical ideas if I choose to take with the knight. So let's take with the bishop first, actually. So let's take with the bishop. They're both good moves, by the way. But after pawn takes, knight takes, I'm threatening to take his bishop, which could lead to some nasty discovered attack. So that's just how the London system works, man. You play the London. Persons don't know how to react to the London, so they start blundering tactics. So let me tell you what should be your game plan if you're a London system player. Because if you play the London system, you probably just don't have enough time to work on your openings, or you're probably lazy. It's the same thing. Get your setup, wait for the tactics, punish them for their blunder. He plays knight takes e5. I'm thinking, do I take on d6 first with check? After queen takes, bishop takes, hit the queen, take on g7? Could be a pawn, but then he could play rook over and win this. Or do I play pawn takes, hit the bishop, forcing the bishop to move, so that way I have more pieces on his king side to attack him? Let's play pawn takes. I'm also gaining a tempo on his bishop, and knight to d6 check is definitely something that I'm considering. It's just something that I'm considering, though. I don't think I'm going to play bishop takes, pawn takes, hit the queen, queen has to move. I would prefer to play something like bishop to g5, hit the queen, and then f6 is not even possible. But here's what I'm going to play. Queen to g4, attacking the unprotected pawn on h7. Well, g7. Castling the king seems like a regular natural move. Oh, he's attacking my pawn. Let's just get the king out the center of the board and defend it at the same time. But let him castle. Let him try to castle. If he castle his king in this position, then the attack that is going to be coming from this is going to be brutal. One more thing I want to tell you guys, if you're a London system player and you're also aggressive, then that's a nice little combination to have. Because I like to think of myself as an aggressive player. So even though I'm playing the boring London system, I'm still trying to attack with it. Castling my king on the next move is regular stuff. Getting my rook on the open D file is also regular stuff. He plays queen to f8. That had to be an uncomfortable decision for him to make. I'm gonna do something crazy now. Instead of castling on the king side, I'm going to castle on the queen side. It's not usually recommended to castle on the queen side in the London system, but his king is stuck in the center of the board, and I wanted to quickly get one of my rooks on the d file. Now he plays bishop to d7. It looks like he's trying to castle. I'm thinking of sacrificing my rook. And then after king takes, I swing over the other rook with check, forcing his king to move. And this attack is just going to be brutal. And I'm not trying to say I don't see how he's going to be getting checkmate or anything, by the way. Like I don't have super villain eyes, but it's just the fact that his queen is out of the game. It's like you have to be able to know how to add up these things. Let me tell you why I'm going to sack. First of all, I'm ahead by a pawn. Second of all, once I takes, his king is not able to get castled. Third of all, his queen is not in the game. Fourth of all, I'm the one who is attacking him. And then once he moves the king, not only is the king not safe, the queen is not in the game, and both of his rooks are not in the game. So you have, as I've been saying before, you have to be able to evaluate a chess position as well. My evaluation made me find this decision. Now, once I play rook to d1, I'm down by a point. But look on the position clearly and deeply. Who is actually down? My rook is doing something. His rooks are not doing anything. So who is down by a rook? My queen is doing something. The only piece you could possibly probably say that I'm not using is my dark squared bishop, which can be activated on this diagonal. So he puts the king back on d6. I'm thinking of just checking his king here. And then once he takes, I take here with the plan of playing pawn push. I think he's going to play rook to d8 though. I think he's going to play rook to d8. So do I play bishop to g5? No, because he has bishop takes e5. I found the move. I found the move. I found the move. I found the move. This is the plan. I'm trying to get my queen to a4. If I'm able to get my queen to a4, that's going to be a checkmate. How do I do it though? How do I do it? Knight to d6. Okay, if I go bishop here, he takes the pawn, knight to f6 check, he takes queen to a4 check. The king has to move and then queen d7 is mate. That's nice. Let's go bishop to g5. So basically what I'm doing is I'm trying to clear this rank for my queen. And there's also no rook to d8. Maybe he wanted to play rook to d8. I prevented that. Maybe he wanted to play queen to e7. I prevented that. So I'm keeping his pieces out of the game as well. Once I play knight to f6 followed by queen a4, that's going to be a very, very nice checkmate. Tell you about the London system. I think the London system should be banned at the lower level. Personally, like if your rating is high, you could play the London. But I think at the lower level, you need to work for your rating points. That's the reason why I don't like the London, because persons don't like to work for their rating points. It's like everybody's putting in work. I need to develop my pieces. I need to not do this in the opening. I need to not do this in the opening. But then there's the London system where you don't have to do anything. You follow all the principles and then you win the game. It's just me, though. It's just me. He plays h6. My fellow viewers, this is a nasty mate. Because first of all, knight to f6 check. If king to e7, rook to d7 is a checkmate. Knight to f6 check. If he takes on f6, queen comes over to a4. This is called a clearance sacrifice. His king is going to be forced to move to e7. And then queen to d7 is going to be a checkmate because he's going to have a pawn on the f6 square, preventing his king from running. So once he takes, the queen swoops over to a4. I mean, maybe he's able to play b5. It's the same thing. So we're not even going to be including b5. The king now has to move. I'm not even going to play queen to d7 checkmate. Once he moves his king, I'm going to play pawn takes f6. A pawn checkmate. Queen to d7 is a checkmate, but that's also a checkmate. We're going to be playing more London system against 1,400 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1,400. We're going to be putting our faith in the Almighty. London life. Well, it's not the Joe Barber. We're not playing the Joe Barber. Well, okay. We've never faced any England Gambit, so this is nice. At least I can show you guys how to beat the England Gambit. So let's just take, as a London system player, a lot of person who plays the London, after e5, they pre-move bishop f4, and they're losing. f6 is bad. Never play f6. I mean, unless you want to lose the game immediately. f6 weakens this diagonal pointing towards the king. Now, because we understand that f6 weakens this diagonal pointing towards the king, we play e4. It looks like a normal move. But if he takes the pawn, it's actually GG's, and it's going to be the shortest game. Because queen to h5 check. If he blocks with the pawn, he loses the rook. If he moves the king, he gets mate. So this is not even the England gambit. This is not the right way to play. This guy's just playing bad. So he decided to play knight to c6. Looks like he wants to be able to take with the pawn. It's a good move. If I play knight here, then he's able to take with the pawn. What I'm not going to do is take on f6. If I take on f6, I'm ahead by a pawn, but let's not be greedy. Let's just develop our pieces. Let's just play knight to f3. Pawn takes, then I just continue with my development. Or even bishop c4. It's crazy. It's like a London turning into an Italian game. The good thing about it is, though, my bishop is going to be too annoying on this diagonal. In fact, am I able to play knight g5? Nah. Maybe I am. Push takes, force him to play queen e7, then I check, force him to move his king, and then I pull my bishop back and I'm threatening a fork. Yeah, this is what happens when you don't know what to play. Knight g5 is actually good. And before you come at me saying that I'm breaking opening principles, I am breaking opening principles. And I know that I'm breaking opening principles. And I know why I'm doing it. You, on the other hand, break opening principles, not knowing why you break opening principles. I'm doing this because the guy played f6. And I know that his king is not going to be able to get castled. And he also played e5. So if someone breaks up principles against you, the right way to respond to it is to break principles. So queen e7 was what we expected. Now we play bishop to f7, checking the king. Obviously, he's not going to sack his thing. So he moves the king. Now that he moves the king, it's like I get surprised when I see these brilliant moves. But then it's kind of embarrassing that I didn't see it from before. Because I know that what if someone wasn't just decided to click off the video because the tactic that I just missed? Because before this, I was saying that I'm going to pull the bishop back, unknowingly seeing that the queen is on the same line as the king, and the king is not able to move here. And there's a forcing move in the game, which is knight e6 check. If I hit him with knight to e6 check, it's GG's. Is that mate? No. Why is it not mate? Because he has to sack his queen. That's crazy. So he sacked the queen, we take the queen, and this is now just GG's. It's just a matter of conversion from here. We're just going to start trading the pieces. He develops his bishop. Let's just develop my bishop, pinning the knight to the king. He's not able to take. Now he's threatening to take because I'm no longer pinned. So let's just pull the bishop back. Like, I can take this whenever. I want to play okay. So he plays rook to f8. He's guarding the knight. So I was thinking of playing queen here, hits the bishop, because the knight is not able to take, but it doesn't really do anything now. With that being said, let's just finish our development. We have more pieces. Knight to d5 check could be a threat. Could be the move that I play next as well. Especially now that he plays h6, attacking my knight. Because once I play knight d5, I apply pressure to the pin piece with check. Once he moves the king, I take the knight, and this pawn on g7 becomes overworked. Because then once he takes my knight, I take on h6. So he decided to pull the king all the way back. Okay, I'm trying to find something better, but let's just take. He could also take my bishop, which he didn't. Now I'm able to take on h6. The rook is unprotected. He has to be careful what he does with his rook. His rook could also be trapped because my light squared bishop is covering this diagonal. All I'm trying to do from here, though, is just to, well, he blundered his rook. Hmm. This is where I start seeing comments saying, the 1400s that I play against don't play like this. They do play like this. You're just not seeing the moves, bro. You're not seeing the moves. So he pulls the bishop back. Let's get the queen in the game. On his half of the board, threatening queen f7, hitting the unprotected bishop, hitting the unprotected pawn, threatening to castle my king. d6 was played, trying to guard this. But let's first attack the bishop, and then once he moves the bishop, then we take the pawn. So he moves the bishop. Let's take the pawn. Pawn to f6. This is going to be checkmate soon. Pawn to f6 hits the bishop. And then once the bishop move, I check. If he puts the king here, my bishop goes in, and that's going to be a checkmate. King to d7 was played. He intentionally decided to mate himself. Bishop to e6 check. King has to go here. Queen to g8 check. King can't move. Has to block with the bishop. Queen takes f8 is going to be a checkmate. So bishop to e6 check. The king has to step to d8. Then queen to g8 check. The bishop has to step to f8. That's just checkmate. More London system coming your way at 1500 players. Stick around. Opponent is now in the 1500 region. Let's go d4, d5, bishop f4. We know the London. So we're just going to be paying attention to the setup. As I've been saying, the move order is not as important. The setup is what is important. Now, after c3, c5, he wants to, let's play e3 here to guard the pawn. I think he wants to take stakes, queen b6. Queen b6, we're not afraid of. Actually, we could actually sacrifice the b2 pawn. Knight c6, we're just going to play pawn to c3. He took those, so let's just take with the pawn. And if I wanted this to be a Joe Bava London, I can always play knight c3 and the whole position transpose into Joe Bava setup. But with the pawn on c3 and the knight on d2, then it's basically a London. With that being said, the London can be transposed into the Joe Bava London. Okay, let me just continue with my development here. It's the most normal development. If he takes my bishop, my queen takes, I'm going to get my king out the center of the board. This knight is going to d2 or c3. Let's take here. I wouldn't want his knight going to the e4 square, so definitely thinking of a move like knight to d2 here. So e3 was played. Let's go knight d2 for good. We're just completing our development. Bishop to d6. And whenever they play bishop to d6, we could always take if we want, but just play knight to e5. Knight e5 keeps more pieces on the board. Being a London system player, the knight on e5 will really annoy people. And then once they take, you can always take back with the pawn and start an attack on their king. My next move from here is just to get my king out the center of the board. Knight c6 was played. Okay, that's a playable move. Let's get our king out the center. We're not afraid of knight to b4, by the way. I mean, we can always play c3 as well. I think he needs to play queen to c7 in this position. Queen to c7 applies a lot of pressure to my e5 knight, but then I should be able to play knight to f3. Rook to c8 was played. Now he really wants to play knight to b4, hits the queen, take the pawn. That's why we're going to play pawn to c3. So again, knowing the setup, knowing the purpose of each moves will make it very, very easy for you to play the London. Usually, black players plan in this position is to try to get the b pawn to b4, weakening the c3 pawn. And then white players in this position is to start an attack on the king. So I'm already thinking of rook e1, rook e3, rook h3, rook lift, start an attack. So he got his king out the center of the board. Let's just play rook to e1 here. It's very important that we have every single one of our pieces in the game. There will always be knight h5 being an annoying move that we have to keep in mind. But if he plays knight h5, I'm probably just going to take on c6, hit the queen. Once he takes, I take on d6, and then I'm going to swing my rook over in the game. Okay, it's not a bad move. Knight to g4 was played. Now, if I take the knight on g4, he's going to take my bishop. And he also wants to play f6 in some lines. My knight is under attack 1, 2, 3 times. I'm guarding 1, 2, 3 times, so I'm perfectly safe. So let's just play knight to f3 here, applying even more defense to my knight. And then if he plays f6, I could say he is weakening his e6 square. In fact, I could take the knight, and then when he take my bishop, I play rook takes e6, and I'm ahead by a pawn. So he plays rook to e8. I think he really wants to play f6. Am I able to play knight to g5, hit f7, hit h7? Can I even sack on f7? And then after king takes, I check. But then he has to play king to e7, and I'm not seeing what I have. I like the idea of knight to g5 though, because if knight g5, if he plays knight back, then his f7 pawn is hanging. He is able to play f5. He is able to play f5. But then I'm going to play knight to f7, hit the queen, forcing the queen to move, take on d6, then knight g6. It's very, very tricky, but I think I'm going to play knight to g5. Yeah, let's go with knight to d5. I'm trying to make knight takes f7 sacrifice works, but it's kind of weird. I think the only thing you could do in this position is to play pawn to f5. And I'm trying to see if I'm able to win the knight on g4, but I'm not seeing it. Because after f5, queen h3, there is knight back to f6. It would be sad if he's not able to find f5 though, because I think he has to find f5. Oh, whoa, he plays queen to f6. He didn't see f5. He didn't see f5. So he's basically allowing me to take. Why is he allowing me to take? Checking over check takes. If you're able to find what I'm about to do, then you could say you have some potential. Queen takes h7 check. That's obvious. The king has to go to f8. However, how do we continue here? Okay, it's just knight b7. Just wins the queen. I thought I had something. I thought I could check here, forcing him to take. Then I check here, and then the rook has to block and all of that stuff. But this is just a queen, so no potential if you find a fork. Like I'm expecting everybody to find a fork. Now the king has to move. We grab the queen. We win the game. He moves the king. We grab the queen. Rook to h8 does not trap our queen. Luckily, he took with the knight. Our queen is under attack. But before I move the queen, we're going to be playing an in-between move. Bishop takes d6 check because I don't want him winning my bishop. He took with the king. Queen is still under attack. Do we move the queen? Do we take this pawn? Do we take on f7? Everything is winning here. Let's take on g7. f7 is still hanging and his knight is under attack. And if I'm able to take on f7 with check, once he moves the queen, me moving my queen with check could lead to a mate or my knight. Knight e4 was played. Now we're going to check here, force his king on the same line as the queen, and then go back. Then he's able to block the check. But let's go for it. Let's check on f7. Forcing the king on the same line as the queen. He is able to block the check though. King to c7 was played. Anywhere I put my knight, he's going to block the check. I don't like that. So let's just play pawn to f3. Let's chase away his knight on e4. We need to have more pieces in the attack. Knight here was played. Okay, now we check here. Now we check here. And then knight to d6 is going to be a fork. That's the idea. I mean, he could also play e5, but I'm just going to take on e5. That should still lead to a fork. King to b6, knight d6 is a fork. This is just completely winning. He resigns. More London system against 1600 rated players. Stick around. Our opponent is now in the 1600 region. Let's play d4. More London system coming your way. b5, we go bishop to f4, regular setup. We know exactly what we're trying to do, and we know exactly where the pieces belong. Pawn is going to be on e3 and c3. A knight is going to be on d2. A knight is going to be on f3, and a bishop is going to be on d3. That's the London system in a nutshell. And if you want to go deeper, you can play moves like pawn h3 to pull the bishop back to h2. The king is obviously going to be castled as well. He plays the move knight c6. Let's just play knight to f3 here. It's just fine. e3, c3, we know the drill. Bishop f4, let's play e3. Now, with this bishop on f5, a move like bishop to d3 is always fine. Like, feel free to just continue with your normal setup. Knight to f6, bishop to d3. The London system is definitely one of the easiest openings to play. You know, it's just very easy. You know exactly what you're going to do with the pieces. You know where you're going to put the pieces. He pulls the bishop back. Let's just go knight to d2. Like, this can be played against any opening that black throws against you. Look at what he just did. I hit the bishop, right? He pulls the bishop back to g6, and then he took on d3. That cannot be good. Maybe he thinks he's doubling up my pawns, but my double pawns on d3 is not that bad. I mean, eventually, long further down in the game, I should be able to play e4. But the thing is, my rook gets this very nice open file. Pawn to e6 was played. Let's just get our king out the center of the board. And knight to h5 is one of those moves in the London system that you have to ensure that you're on the lookout for. Bishop to d6 was played. I'm thinking of playing knight e5 here, but because I don't have a light squared bishop, knight e5 may not be the best decision because after takes, knight back, d4, my bishop is just going to be a bad piece. So let's just take on d6. It's just a regular position. He decided to take with the queen, and all I need to do here is connect my rooks. Pawn push, takes. If knight takes, I fork, and if he takes, I takes. But then he takes. Pushed. With that being said, let's just put our rook on the open file. Like when in doubt, just find a piece that is not doing anything, put it on a better score. Your opponents, they're gonna be doing weird stuff. Like once the move that you make is, for example, he just did something weird. Like he had no reason to castle his king on the queen side in this position. All of a sudden, he's giving me something to attack. Now I'm just gonna start my attack. So I'm thinking a3, b4. I'm thinking knight to b3 to c5. Let's go with knight to b3 in this position. It's now important for us to start moving pieces over to where his king is. And once I lodge my knight on the c5 square, things is not going to be pretty for him. Now he's starting his attack. He also is trying to attack me, but his attack is going to be a bit slower. Let's go knight to c5 here. I'm already applying pressure to his b7 pawn, which is only being guarded by his king. Like, if he wants a fast attack in this position, he probably needs to just play g5, sack the pawn, swing the rook over, move my knight, double up on the file or something. Knight d7 makes some sense. I see what he's trying to do. He's basically trying to neutralize the pieces that is in his half of the board. But my next move I really like. Look on this move. Pawn to b4. The knight is able to take the pawn on b4. Did I just didn't count? Is that just a blunder? Or I'm trying to get rid of the pawn so that way once his knight takes and I hit him with something like queen to b3, I now have two open files pointing towards his king. And then the attack is going to be brutal once that happens. Okay, he took the pawn. Maybe he thinks I'm blundering. Queen to b3. First of all, he's not able to move the knight, which is why he took. But that's bad, sir, because once I take on c5, my pawn attacks your queen. My queen attacks your knight. How are you gonna not lose an entire piece in this position? This is what happens when you castle on opposite sides. You have to be aggressive. You can't have opposite side castles and then you're just playing normally, like nothing is happening. You have to start your attack. So he moves his queen. Let's just take the free knight. And from here, this is just GG's. I want to get my pawn to c6. He took here. Yeah, this is bad now because pawn to c6, he has to push. But now he has so much light square weaknesses around this king. Like once I start getting my queen around there, it's gonna be over, man. I'm telling you. He has to play b6. That's the thing. He just has to play b6 here. Oh, he pulls the queen back. Pulling the queen back is not going to help. I'm definitely going to take. Look at this. I have two files on this king. And first of all, if I trade the queens off the board, that's completely winning. But because I'm on the attacking side, I don't want to trade the queens, which is why I'm going to play queen to d4. One of my rook is going on b1. The other rook is going to be on c1. Maybe I could play knight to e5. All my pieces are going to be doing something in the game. And this attack is just going to be GG's. Okay, he moved. He moves his rook to g8. He's actually worried about his g7 pawn. I'm not even seeing that pawn. Like, I'm going for the attack. Let's hit him with rook to b8. Hit the queen. Queen has to move. The queen is the only piece that is guarding this pawn. My queen is attacking the pawn. He ensured that he kept the pawn guarded. Now I'm going to play rook to c1. Look on this. This is what you want when you're attacking. This is what you want to see. You want to see your rooks pointing towards the opponent's king. You want to see your pieces pointing towards the opponent's king. Rook to d6 was played. It's not a terrible move. I'm trying to figure out a way to set up a checkmate on his c7 pawn. Queen to c5 is very strong. It's decent, I'm not going to say it's very strong. But it's hard for him to prevent the checkmate here. Like, he has to either backpedal the rook. It's not rook b6, it's not pawn c6, so I guess it's rook back to d7, and then my knight joins the attack with knight e5, hits the rook, and then if he moves the rook, I hit him with knight c6, hit him with rook to b8, and that's going to be a checkmate. This is how you attack. Okay, rook to c6. Maybe he just didn't know what to do because I have two pieces covering the square. His queen is only covering the square. Let's just take the rook. If he takes, I'm just going to take on c6 and I'm ahead by not only a rook, but a rook and a knight. He plays king to d7 to attack my rook. I'm going to play knight e5. Check the king, guard my rook, forcing his king to move. And then once the king move, I'm thinking of taking this pawn, but king up seems to be a 4. So let's play f4, guarding the knight. This could also lead to some very nice checkmating patterns. Maybe he plays king to f6 though, and just try to run away with his king. But once I get both of my rooks on the 7th rank, it's going to lead to GG's. He guards the pawn. Let's just get one of my rook on the 7th rank. Maybe he's able to guard it this way. That's a free pawn. That's a free pawn. Everything is winning here. Pawn to f6. Okay, let's just take on c7. I mean, we're ahead in material. We're trying to trade. We're ahead by two pieces. This is GG's. He moves his king to d6, hits my king, hits my knight. I have to check his king first. And then when he moves his king, it's just conversion here. We can always take his pawns, get our king in the game. Well, he resigns. More London system against 700 rated players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1700. We're still playing the London system. Five was played. This is called the Dutch defense. The London can be played against any opening that the opponent plays. So we're still going to be using the regular London setup. As you guys could see, like I've explained this so much times, you guys should just know exactly what's happening. Now, because he plays d5, it's now called the Stonewall Dutch, but the same setup applies, the same plan applies, the same principles applies. Bishop to d6 was played, and I like to play knight to e5, being a London system player, especially when you play against the Dutch. Knight e4 is usually an annoying move, and you want to be ready to play a move like f3, chasing away that knight. So he plays c6, not sure exactly why. Let's just develop my bishop. Do I put the bishop on e2 or d3? Let's put the bishop on d3. There's no knight h5. Maybe I want to play f3 followed by e4. The reason why I wasn't sure where to put the bishop is it's kind of just pointing towards a pawn chain, and that could be annoying. He needs to castle his king here. What I like about this position, it's so easy for players to blunder against London system players. And that's because the London system, it's so simple to play. For example, I just need to castle my king. My development is complete while he still has two pieces on the back rank. He needs to develop his bishop. He also needs to develop his knight. He pulls the bishop back to c7. We could say he's wasting a move because why does he want to move the bishop again though? Okay, let's continue with the setup. Let's just play c3 here. It's regular London that is happening. Knight to d7. I was expecting that move. Let's just play knight to f3, just supporting our knight on the e5 square. And again, I want you guys to have a look on this light squared bishop and have a look on all these pawns that are on the light square. That's called a bad bishop. That may be the only piece that caused me to win this game. Okay, queen to e8 was played. Okay, okay. Think he wants to move his queen over to h5, but that does not work. His bishop is now unprotected, so I'm trying to find tactics. If I takes, however, he has queen takes. Um, let's play queen to c2, rook to e1. That's the plan. Because eventually I'm going to be able to play pawn to f3 followed by pawn to e4. It may look weird now, it may look as if it's not possible now, but that's actually the plan. It's not really easy to break through these pawns. I'm not going to lie. The stone wall is a respectable line. He decided to take on e5. Let's just take back on e5. It's just a trade. None of us lost any material. Then he pulls his knight back to d7. It looks as if he's just trying to trade the pieces off the board, to be honest. If I take his knight, I think he's going to take my bishop, and he's also threatening to take here as well. It's a bit annoying, to be honest. But that being said, let's just continue with our plan. Pawn to f3. We want to be able to play pawn to e4, so that way our bishop is going to be a bit more active. He took, let's just take here. There's a lot of trading that is happening on the e5 square. But at the end of the day, my light squared bishop is better than his light squared bishop. Let's play pawn to e4. He finally develops the bishop, but I'm still not seeing what it does. I also have double pawns, so I'm just going to get rid of my double pawns. For example, I may take on d5, and then once he takes, that's a very weak pawn. Maybe he could take with the c pawn. Let's see. Okay, so he took, let's just take back, opening the file for my rook. If he wants to trade rooks, that's on him. He has to be careful about the fact that I have a battery along h7, which is why he played queen h5, good move. But let's just take on d5. His queen is also attacking this pawn, so I need to be careful. I need to ensure that I'm able to play a move like rook to e1, just guarding the pawn immediately. He needs to take with the C pawn though, to be honest. I think he needs to take with the C pawn in this position. Okay, but then he took with the E pawn. I don't think that was the most accurate move to play because now my rook has this very strong pass pawn. Let's play rook to E1. All my pieces are now active. By the way, this rook is not really doing anything, and I would like to play pawn to e6, just pushing my pass pawn up the board. He traded one pair of rooks off the board. Let's just take. Now I have this rook on a very nice open file. I guess he's trying to bring this rook in the game, but rook to f8 would be a blunder. His queen is not able to take here because he's losing this pawn. So that was just wasting time, to be honest. He puts his rook on e8 instead. Hmm. He's attacking this pawn twice. He wants to play rook takes. Let's play bishop to f5. If he dares to take my pawn, I take his bishop. If he takes my rook, however, I take and I'm attacking his queen. I think he has to play bishop takes. I'm not really seeing what else he has, to be honest. Okay, bishop takes. Let's go rook takes. Hit the queen, guarding my pawn. Now, once he moves the queen, I'm thinking of just doubling up on the f file and then just pushing my pawn up the board to create some threats on his weak back rank. So queen to g6 was played. Need to be careful due to this pin. Let's go queen to f2, getting the queen out of the pin. In some cases, some variations, I could get my rook on his back rank. My queen is also attacking this unprotected pawn. Not that I'm able to take it because my rook would be hanging, but something to keep in mind. I have a plan of playing h4 followed by h5 here, hitting the queen. This guy's playing very, very well though. It's surprising he hasn't made a blunder or anything already. So he did play queen to e6. Think he's just trying to hold the position to a draw. We're still going to play h4 here. My goal is to start some form of attack on his king. So especially if I'm able to get him to push one of these pawns, if I could get him to push one of the pawns on the side that his king is on, then that's going to be nice. I also, okay, so g6 was played. That's a start. That's definitely a start. If I go here, he takes, then I go here, he goes here. So let's go here. We have to ensure that we guard the pawn. Our rook is on the same line as his king, which means pawn to h5 is coming. There's actually a little attack that is coming here. He has to be careful. Rook to f8, I may just take a free pawn. Pawn to h6, I just need to pull back my rook. And if he takes this pawn, his g pawn is going to be hanging. So he hits the rook. Let's pull the rook back. Queen takes would be bad, seeing that this pawn is going to be hanging. So he has to ensure that he guard his g6 pawn before he tries to win any material. King to g7, okay. King to g7, I'm thinking of h5 actually. I'm also thinking of just taking this pawn. But then if I takes, queen takes, takes, he block with the rook. And then my queen is under attack, my rook is under attack. That's not good. h5, let's go h5 here. Apply more pressure to this pawn. And then if he moves the pawn forward, that's what I'm expecting. I'm able to play queen to c2. Now, what I'm doing is called counter-attacking. I think my last four moves were counter-attacking moves because he's just not able to take on e5. For example, now I'm going to play queen to c2, controlling these light squares. So that way his queen, you could say, is tied down to guarding the e6 square. And then eventually, I'm going to use the time to get my rook in the game. But then if he plays rook to f8 in this position, that's not a bad move, to be honest. Pawn to c5 was played. Okay, maybe he wants to play d4. Let's play rook to f3 here. The plan is to play rook to f6. If he allows me to play rook to f6, then it's just game over and I win. He has to find rook to f8 now. which is an easy move to find. After rook to f8, he did find rook f8. I'm thinking of taking on f8, and then once the king takes, my queen swoops in. But do I go to g6 or h7? Let's go to h7. It's the same idea. If he takes this pawn, my queen takes this pawn. So he moves his queen over to b6, keeping this guarded. That looks weird though, because this pawn is now strong. All I need to do is push this pass pawn off the board, you know. For example, queen to d7. The plan is now to play e6. Queen to d7 is just to guard the e6 square for my pawn. If he pushes this pawn just to check my king, I'm just going to move. If he takes here, I'm just going to push. And yeah, this should be winning now. This guy played really well. This guy played very, very well. That's just a check. All we're going to do is just move the king out the way. Nothing is coming. Pawn to e6 is still the threat. And okay, queen to c6 was played. That's not a bad move. I'm trying to push my pawn, but then after takes, his king is going to catch the pawn. So we have to give a check on d8 first. Let's force the king to move. This is the pass pawn that is going to help me to win the game. King to g7 was played. Let's give another check on e7. He has to move the king again, and then we're able to push the pass pawn. Once you're playing in the end game, the whole goal, your whole plan should be surrounding pushing the pass pawn, even if it takes you a few moves. Now I push the pass pawn. The threat is now to play queen to f7 check. King has to move, pawn to e7, and that's going to be a forced win. Like he has to sacrifice his queen. I'm not seeing how he's going to prevent this. Okay, queen to c8. Now we check. The king has to go here, and pass pawns must be pushed. There's nothing he could do. Remember, I told you guys that that pass pawn is going to help me to win the game. You see what I'm telling you about now? Because now he just has to sack the queen on the next move, and it's GG's. Well, he resigned. But we're playing more London system against 1800 pillars. Like the video. Our opponent is now 1800. Let's hit him with the London system. Knight f6, bishop f4. What is he coming with? D5, let's just play knight to f3 here. This is the London, not the Joe Bava. Probably going to be doing a video on the Joe Bava because the Joe Bava is a bit more aggressive. But obviously, when something is a bit more aggressive, it comes with more risk. He develops his knight. I don't usually recommend that people play moves like knight c6, blocking their c pawn, but let's go e3. Let's just continue with our normal London setup. Develops his bishop. We're able to develop our bishop as well. Remember, we don't have any issues with this trade. He pulls back his bishop. Now I'm just going to get my king out the center of the board. Now, from a development perspective, all the moves are just easy. Pawn to e6, we play knight to d2, just developing our pieces. And then he plays bishop to d6. He's also trying to develop. Now, I'm thinking of playing knight e5. And if bishop takes, I take, but then he has knight back. So maybe at knight e5, bishop takes, knight back, f4. And then I'm going to try to use this structure to start an attack. I usually recommend people, just put a knight on the e5 square, if you can. It's also a very annoying move to deal with. But after bishop takes, I don't want to take with the pawn. Knight back could win my pawn. So I'm actually going to take with the bishop. And if he takes, I takes, hit the knight. The knight has to move. He pulls the knight back to attack my e-pawn, and then I play f4 to guard the pawn. So this is just like one of the structures that could possibly happen. It doesn't mean that I'm winning or I'm losing. It's just a structure. Both sides is now trying to create a plan. So he castle his king. His king is now safe. Now we're going to be connecting our rooks. Let's go queen to e2, connecting our rooks. We want to play moves like c4 or e4 because our development is complete. Knight c5 was played. Knight c5 is a very nice move because he's just trying to get rid of my bishop. Now I could take his bishop, but I think he's able to take and he's fine. I'm probably going to allow him to take, and then I'm going to try to play e4 followed by f5 and just play against his bishop. So I'm going to have a knight. He's going to have a bishop. A bishop is better than a knight, but I think I have some compensation. With that being said, let's play knight to f3. Eventually, I want to be able to keep my knight on the d4 square or something. But this is going to be a more long-term plan. I'm more focused on ensuring that all my pieces are doing a role. So for example, this rook on a1, I'm trying to bring it to d1. So he took, let's take back. And I want you guys to notice how once I take back here, my rook gets the open c file. Okay, he plays f6, which is, I don't think f6 was needed. I don't think he understand why f6 either, because if I take on f6, he actually needs to take with a pawn and not a rook or a queen. because my knight is going to be very, very strong. Mm, Okay, that move doesn't really do a lot. Let's just go rook to c8. Let's get to a rook on the file. Taking is bad, by the way, because then I'm going to have a very strong knight. Maybe I'm going to take here. So he got his rook in the game. Let's take on f6. He needs to take with the pawn. I think he has to take with the pawn. Taking with the queen or the rook is actually very, very bad. And I kind of predicted that he was going to take with the queen or the rook. But what I have here is called, well, this is what I call it. I call it like an eternal knight. It's like if you're able to put one of your pieces in an outpost in the opponent's position, especially if it's a knight versus a light squared bishop, then the opponent is just never going to be able to chase out your knight anymore. So he puts the rook on d8, preventing this fork. I'm assuming he wants to play pawn to c5, just to activate his c rook. So the move that I'm going to be playing is called a prophylactic move, pawn to b4. The idea of b4 is, again, or the idea of a prophylactic move is seeing the opponent's idea and trying to prevent it. And the reason why I didn't play d4 instead of b4, or the reason why I didn't play d4 is because if I play d4, his bishop is a bit more active. Now that he plays d4, I'm able to play e4, and I have his bishop pointing towards a pawn chain. So that is still good for me. So not only is my knight very, very strong, I'm not really seeing what his bishop is doing. Can't go here. He could try to put it somewhere over here, but not really seeing a good score for it. This is going to be one of those positional squeeze because I'm also planning on doubling up my rooks on the c file. We have to be patient in these types of positions, though. Like, you don't want to rush something. For example, he pulled his queen back to e7, and I'm already thinking about giving up the knight because it doubles up his pawns. And I think it would give me a winning position, but I prefer to be a bit more patient. He's hitting this. I'm thinking rook here, but then he goes here and attack my rook. But then I go here, hit the queen, and then once he moves the queen, I move my rook, hit this pawn. And he has to move his rook, and then he's going to be losing the d4 pawn. Okay, let's go with this plan. It's a very nice idea. It's probably I made a miscalculation, but it's not necessarily a fork. I'm going to be using the fact that if he plays b6, he's no longer guarding c6 against him. So b6, knight c6 fork. Queen goes here, pull the rook back. And now I have two pieces attacking d4. He has to move d4, then we take on d4. Otherwise, I'm just going to be doubling up on the c file, targeting the c7 pawn. So he pulls the bishop back to f7. I'm thinking of playing pawn to f5, which pawn to f5 does not go with what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to do a slow positional game. We're trying to use the fact that our knight is better than the bishop against him. But this is like, I think this is called conversion or transferring of an advantage. So for example, if you have this as an advantage, my knight is better than his bishop, I could actually give up the knight to get something that I think is either as equal to this advantage or better. So what I'm thinking of is pawn to f5. If he takes, I take on f7 first. If he takes with the queen, he's not going to take with the king, obviously. If he takes with the queen, I play rook takes, and then he moves the queen. Okay, I'm not playing that. I don't see what I get for. I'm not playing that. Let's just double up the rook. I'm not playing that. I could also triple on the c file as well. All of what I'm doing is called a battery. So he plays pawn to a6. Maybe he's not sure what to do. Or he wants to play c6 and he doesn't want me to be able to play b5 and apply pressure to c6. Because if he plays c6 and I play b5, he's not able to take because of this. So again, this is just positional chess happening. I'm going to play a4 so that way, and this is called a minority attack, by the way, using less pawns to attack more pawns. If c6, which he had played, no, I'm going to hit him with b5 because after takes, I'm fine. If he takes with the c pawn, he's losing, and after b5, if he plays b6, he loses the c pawn. This is positional chess. This is more of a strategic chess. I know that you guys like to see the whole, let me sacrifice this and do this, but you also need to be able to play chess at this level as well. And that's because my opponent is not weak. He's 1800. And sometimes you have to just be able to have better strategy than the opponent to beat them because nobody's going to just blunder their pieces. Nobody's going to put a bishop somewhere where you're guarding it or blunder an easy tactic. So you have to be able to grind out certain position. So bishop back to e8 was actually a really nice move. Now I'm thinking about it, maybe I should have took the bishop then take back, and that would have given me a free pawn. However, let's count. He has one, two, three pieces guarding c6. I have one, two, three, four pieces attacking c6. That's a free pawn. He took with the bishop. I don't want to give up my knight though. My knight is too good. But a pawn is a pawn at the end of the day. Okay, takes, pawn takes, rook takes. Or look for a better move. I don't think I'm in a rush to win any pawn. I'm not in any rush to win any pawn. My position is too good. I could triple up on him, but then he goes here. Then I grab the bishop and he's losing. If I triple up on him, yeah, let's triple up on him first. Now I'm tripling up on the open file, which means taking on c6 is still a free pawn. He has what, two defenders? I have one, two, three, four attackers. I'm just not rushing it. Remember, we don't want to be rushing because me playing this queen c2 move, I probably could have won a pawn from before, but maybe the move that he's going to play now is going to be a blunder and I'm going to win a piece because I'm applying so much pressure to the position. I'm going to, okay, so he plays queen to h4, which is not bad. I'm seeing that he's leaving his e6 pawn unprotected, but I'm also seeing that he's attacking my f4 pawn. Offense is definitely the best defense though, so I'm thinking of playing bishop queen to c4 first before I even try to defend the pawn. So that way he has to play a defensive move. Because then if he takes, I check. And if king over, I check. And that's a smothered mate? No, but then he loses the rook. So let's go with that idea. Let's go queen to c4. So I'm mixing tactics with strategy. But tactics flows from a superior position, anyways. So you have to ensure that you have a good position. That's how you're going to be seeing the tactics. Your pieces has to be on very good squares like this in order for tactics to happen in your game. If I could get him to play a move like rook to d8 to guard the pawn, then I'm going to feel happy with that because then his rook is going to be leaving his d4 pawn unprotected. But before I take the d4 pawn, I'll hit him with g3, attack the queen, guard my pawn, then take, which is why he plays rook to d6, which makes some sense because not only is he guarding this pawn, he's also applying some defense here. So it's one, two, three defender, one, two, three, four attackers. So if I takes, rook takes, rook takes, I'm actually not able to win anything. I'm thinking about playing pawn to f5 here, applying some pressure because his pawn is pinned. Pawn to f5, queen to f4 doesn't attack anything. All my pieces are protecting each other. So then I'm just going to take here. And that's why you want to have all your pieces protecting each other. If all your pieces are protecting each other, then you have the best coordination. My knight is nothing is unprotected. And if nothing is unprotected, it's harder for tactics to flow from the position. You know, he's not going to be able to find a nice tactic because my pieces guards each other. I actually was expecting queen to f4, which is why I looked on it, but my pieces, they just guard each other. So now I'm just going to take on e6. And once I take on e6, maybe he has a check, but that's all it is. I'm just going to move my king. Taking on e6, however, if he plays rook to f8 trying to checkmate me here, I actually saw that my knight goes to f7, and then I'm basically blocking out his rook. This is piece coordination 101. No. Oh, he just blundered. He legit just thought my knight was unprotected. This guy's, come on, bro, you're 1800, man. But after takes, if he had played rook to f8, I actually would have pushed and win some material. But he he decided to give me his queen instead. So I'm gonna take the queen. My opponent resigns. Now we're gonna be playing 1900 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now in the 1900 region. More London system coming your way. Knight f6. Now we go bishop to f4. That's the whole idea of the London. And then he plays pawn to g6. Now, whenever you're playing the London, if you're playing against pawn to g6, I highly recommend that you transpose it into the Joe Barber London. It's still the London. I'm going to be making a separate video on just playing the Joe Barber in general. But the most aggressive way to play against these types of setup is to play e4, which is why he played d5 to prevent this. But now I'm just going to play queen to d2. I want to just castle my king as quickly as possible and then being able to play moves like bishop to h6 and just start my attack on his king. So bishop to g7 was played. I don't think bishop to h6 will work for me just yet. So let's focus on king safety. Let's get the king out center of the board. I'm basically castling on the queen side and he's castling on the king side. So you guys should know what's about to happen. It will be a crazy game. Now to start my attack, I'm going to play the move pawn to h4. I want to play pawn to h5 here. And yes, I'm just sacrificing a clean pawn. My whole idea is to open the h file for my rook. Black, on the other hand, needs to play moves like c5 or h5. h5 is also one way to play. Whenever I see h5, though, I like to play f3 followed by g4. It's very important that it is prepared first, though. So let's start with f3. If c5, I'm probably going to take because d5 is weak. I want to play bishop to h6 just to get rid of his dark squared bishop as quickly as possible. Because if I'm not able to get rid of his dark squared bishop, then the attack is going to be very hard. Knight to c6. That's a very weird and suspicious move. Where is he going to do a pawn break? Maybe he wants to do a pawn break on e5 if I play bishop h6. Bishop h6, pawn e5, takes, king takes, 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 and then I'm winning a pawn. g4 takes, h5. This is crazy. I'm about to do something. Nah, I'm not going to do that. That's too crazy. Let's just go bishop to h6. That's too crazy. Let's do it the slow way. I want to play g4 though. I want to play g4. And I want you guys to notice how my development is still not complete, but my knight on g1 wants to go to squares like h3 to g5. My bishop on f1, I want to play moves like e3 and bishop to d3. But if I play e3, then I won't be able to play bishop to h6. So I'm just trying to get rid of this bishop first so that way I'm able to play e3. I am also thinking of e4, but e4 signifies that I'm trying to attack in the center. I'm not trying to attack in the center. I'm trying to attack his king. a5. I knew he would have started his own attack. He's trying to start his own attack on my king. So takes, king takes. Eventually, his rook could go to h8. g4 takes, h5. Yeah, let's go with g4. Now we're going to go with g4. Now the plan from here is just to open everything on his king. I'm still not developing my knight and my bishop, so ensure that you keep that in mind. The thing about getting better at chess is you have to know when to follow principles, but you actually get really good at chess if you're able to break a principle, knowing that it is safe to do something like that. So no one C takes. I'm not going to take back. That's not the plan. The plan is to play h5. The whole idea is to get my h rook in the game. And I just did that. My plan from here is to take this pawn. Once he takes, I take the bishop. My queen goes into h6. And you could see I start an attack. If he plays knight takes h5, I'm going to sack the rook. And then once the pawn takes, queen to g5, and that's an immediate force mate. If pawn takes, queen to g5 is also an immediate force mate. Oh, oh, it's not a force mate. It's not a force mate. He's able to play knight e8. Okay, queen to g5, knight to e8, queen takes h5, and then the attack is brutal, right? Yeah, let's go for it. Queen to g5. It's not a force mate. Thought it was a force mate, but knight is able to go to e8, guarding the bishop. But that's fine, because once he moves the knight, there's nothing covering the h5 square. Queen takes h5, and then this attack that I have on his king is crazy stuff. So he pulled the knight back. Let's take here. Now I'm threatening to take. Knight takes, queen mate, and if king takes, queen h6, queen h8 mate. So he has to find a very nice defensive move. And the good thing about this position is I'm not able to find his own defensive moves. So he puts the knight back on f6. Not too bad, because if I put my queen here, he puts the knight back. Okay, but then if I put my queen here, he pushes the e pawn, but then I pull my bishop back, hit the queen, and I'm threatening mate on h7. So queen back to g5, knight back to e8. Now I go queen to h4. If he moves the e pawn to attack my queen, bishop back to g5 hits the queen. And then I'm threatening checkmate on h7. So let's go for that. Queen to g5, threatening a mate. Maybe he thinks I'm repeating the position. He quickly pulls the knight back. But now I put my queen on h4. That's where I put my queen. Now if he plays knight to f6, I'm just going to take, because if king takes, queen h6, king back to g8, queen h8 is mate, which is why he played pawn to e5, my fellow viewers. But bishop to g5. My bishop attacks the queen. My queen threatens a checkmate. How is he going to prevent two different threats in the position? He's either going to be losing his queen or he's going to be getting checkmated here. Oh, or he's going to play pawn to f6. Why am I missing everything today? Why am I missing everything? Because if I check here, he goes here. And then I takes, he takes. Do I not have enough pieces in the attack? What? If I take, he takes. Then if I check, the king goes here. Okay. I don't want to do it, but I think we have to sacrifice a piece here. I mean, I could also just pull my bishop back to e3. I check, king up, check. Maybe he just puts back the king. I think I'm just better. I don't think I have to sack. I think I'm just better. But I really did not see that move. So it's very annoying. Takes, C6, and then I'm not seeing my attack. It's I think I'm gonna sacrifice because it's just annoying. I prefer to sacrifice here. So check, king up, check, king back. Yeah, let's do that. Let's check here. The king has to go here. Now we check here. So that way, once he takes, the queen is not under attack. Assuming he's gonna put the king back on G8, because he wants to draw, then I'm gonna take on E5 and just sack the bishop and just quickly get the rest of my pieces in the game. I think the reason why the attack did not immediately go through is due to my lack of development. But usually black has a lot of defensive resources here. So he puts the king back. Now we take on E5, and this is where the game gets interesting because I just sacrificed an entire bishop. So he took my bishop. The question is, do we take with the rook hit the queen? No, because the queen goes here. Do we take with the knight? Maybe he's able to do this. Okay, let's take with the knight. I'm threatening to play knight. Well, I'm not threatening knight f6 because he has takes, but I want to be able to get my minor pieces in the game as quickly as possible. For example, if my bishop was on c4 here, then that would be nice. So he plays bishop to d7. That doesn't seem like the best defensive resource. Now I'm thinking of pushing this pawn, but then once his bishop takes, I don't really see what I have. I mean, that's just a check. The king is gonna move. Bishop takes. Maybe go here, hit the queen. But yeah, the queen is just gonna move. So I don't have anything there just yet. I could push takes, knight up, hit the queen though, and then pick up the rook. But then queen f6 threatens b2 though. Let's take on g4. I think we need to develop, and I think I need more pieces in the attack here. So I think I would love to get a rook on f1, maybe get my knight on f3. I need more pieces in the game. The good thing is I still like my position. Knight e5 was played. He's now threatening g4. Check, there's king up. So still doesn't work. Okay, let's develop. Let's develop my knight. If he takes, I go pawn takes, and it's going to be easier for me to develop my bishop. Taking would actually be a very bad move because it really helps my development. Knight f6, I'm also not worried of because once I take queen takes, check, king up, I'm able to take on d7 after knight takes e5. So what is he going to play? That's the thing. If he takes on, okay, he did take. I think this is bad. Pawn takes. Once I manage to play bishop to c4, things could get very, very bad. And he plays knight to f6. Oh, wait. Okay, it's GG's, right? Knight takes f6 check, queen takes f6, queen h7 check, force the king to f7, rook takes f7 check, king back, and then take on g7 and I'm winning. Okay, knight takes f6 check. Oh, there's also rook takes, but if rook takes, there's bishop c4 check, but then there's king f1, man. Hmm. Oh, queen takes f6. Bishop is hanging. But if I take the bishop, he takes my pawn. So we check on h7 first, forcing the king to go to f7. Then we take the bishop. We got back our piece with some extra. Because then once the king goes here, we're able to take a free pawn, which wins the game. The question is, do I take with the rook and try to checkmate him, or do I take with the queen and try to simplify the game? Yeah, we have to take with the queen here. I think this is once we take with the queen, then it's going to be impossible for us to lose. Yeah, let's just take back. My rook is also on his second rank. I mean, if he plays rook takes f3 here, he's also going to be losing a rook, which is why he resigns. But we're going to be doing more London system against 2,000 rated players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 2,000. Let's finish off the London. D5, we go bishop to f4. This is the London system. Knight f6, knight f3. We already know exactly what's happening. Black is playing it very theoretical. Pawn c5. I think he wants to play knight c6 here. Good time to play c3 and just support d4. Bishop to d6 was played. Not a bad move. If I take, there's queen takes. But let's just play knight to e5. Nah, knight e5, knight c6, pd7, queen c7. It's very tricky. Maybe we should just take or pull the bishop back. For this one, I'm going to pull the bishop back. If I take, it helps the queen. So I'm going to pull the bishop back. Now that he plays queen c7, he's not really applying more pressure here. So let's just continue. with our regular London setup. Knight to d7 was played. Looks like he wants to play e5 very early though. Knight e5 takes, and that's bad. Yeah, he wants to play a very early e5, which is not a bad way to play. Let's just castle the king. Let's just continue with our London setup. So he manages to play e5. If I'm not wrong, I think we just have to take. If we do anything else, he's going to push. So let's just take. And then after knight takes, he's attacking my bishop. So it does make sense to take. And then once he takes here, I don't want to take because then that's going to help his queen. I just need to complete my development. The knight is the only piece that's not developed. So let's just play knight to d2. It's just a regular normal game, but let's see if I'm able to push for an advantage coming out of this. So I need to connect my rooks first and foremost. So it's either queen e2 or queen c2. I think they're both fine, but I'm going to go queen c2 in case I want to go c4 and I don't want to lose this pawn. I'm also not afraid of c4 because I'm always able to go bishop here. He plays b6. Looks like the bishop is going to be 7. Hmm. Now we're thinking of pawn breaks. Where do we break? Do we play c4 or do we play e4? Yeah, let's go with e4. Let's go with e4. I want to open the e file for my rook. He took. Let's just take back. Knight takes is actually bad because I'm going to be able to take the knight, hit the rook, and threaten h7. And I'm currently threatening to take the knight, then take on h7. And if I take on f6, he's not able to play bishop takes because his queen is pinned. Did he just make a mistake? What is he going to play? Maybe he takes on g3, but then I take and I double up his pawn. If he moves the queen, I take and I win this pawn. Yo, that was weird. Another London mistakes. Okay, knight d5. That makes perfect sense. Knight d5 makes perfect sense because I would love to take on h7, but I have to move my knight out of the way. But I'm just not seeing a good square to put my knight where it forces something. Maybe knight g5, no, but h6, he has h6. Takes, queen takes, then go rook to e1. So that way I gain a little tempo on his queen. Or I could go rook to d1 because his knight is unprotected. Okay, I think he found a defense. Let's go with this one. Let's take on e5 so that way once the queen takes, I'm able to play rook to e1 and or at least I'm still forcing him to react to my move. Once his queen moves, I would love to move my knight so that way h7 is under attack. And then once I move my knight so that way h7 is under attack, I'm able to go bishop e4 and apply some pin to his knight and his rook on a8, which he's going to be able to defend. So I don't think I'm winning, but he has to react to my move. So that's what I'm working with. Queen to h5 was played. I don't mind that move because now I'm able to play knight g3, still applying pressure to his queen, and he has to ensure that he keeps the defense on his h7 pawn. So let's pull the knight back, hit the queen. Queen has to move. It's very easy for him to keep h7 under some defense. But once the queen move, I'm going to go bishop to e4. This is nice. I'm actually seeing some very strange tactical idea coming from this. For example, if queen h6, bishop e4, bishop b7, knight f5, hit the queen. And then I could take, check, and pick up something here. It's crazy. Queen to h4 was played. I think it's the same exact thing because the goal is to get the knight on the f5 square. So bishop to e4, pinning the knight to the rook, bishop to b7, knight f5 hits the queen. It doesn't matter where the queen goes. I take the knight, and once the bishop, I go knight e7 and check. Actually, it does matter where the queen go because if the queen goes somewhere where the knight is guarded, then it doesn't really work. But it has to be bishop to e4 here, applying some pin to the knight. Because if he tries to guard it, in some cases I could also apply even more pressure to the knight. I thought I could have played c4, bishop to b7, but there is knight to b4, so he's getting away with that one. Bishop b7, knight f5 is coming for sure. I want you guys to notice at the high level, the initiative is so important because nobody's going to be blundering like a basic tactic. Nobody's going to be putting their pieces on a square where it just doesn't do anything. But if you could keep the initiative, if every move that you play is an attacking move, it's an easier way for the opponent to blunder basically. So he did play bishop b7. We are going to play knight to f5, hit the queen, and I think he should just pull his queen all the way back to d8. Yeah, I have a lot of tactical ideas. If queen d8, knight e7, knight takes, and then I take the bishop. Queen to g5 was played instead, which is also fine because once I takes bishop takes check, the moment he moves the king, the queen guards the bishop, which is why I'm thinking of h4, chasing away the queen from guarding that bishop. I'm also thinking of knight e7 check, because if knight takes, I take. Okay, let's go h4 first. Yeah, let's definitely go h4 first. We have the initiative. We want to chase away the queen anyways. Think he needs to go. If he pulls the queen back to d8, then that's good. At least I could get him to disconnect his rooks. And if he plays queen to d8, now I'm able to go rook to d1, and I'm pinning the knight to the queen, and I'm pinning the knight to the bishop. So the initiative is still very important here. I think h4 was a nice move. Maybe queen h5? Yeah, he has to ensure that he tried to guard the knight. So I think he needs to play queen h5 here. Yeah, he found queen h5. That was a nice move. Okay, now we have to keep up the pressure. I'm thinking rook to d1, apply more pressure to the knight. Takes, check king move, or takes, rook e5, attack the bishop. Because now I hit the bishop and I'm threatening knight e7. How am I thinking of these moves? Takes, rook e5. Rook is on the same line as the king. Bishop is unprotected. If he moves the queen, we take the bishop. If he moves the bishop, we check, pick up the queen. Tactics, man. Tell you guys, tactics flows from a superior position. He's been finding a lot of stuff. So let's see what he's going to find here. Let's see what he's going to find here. This is nice. This is nice. Tell you, once there are unprotected pieces in the opponent's position, tactics will come. You have to realize the unprotected pieces, realize the weaknesses, see the possible checks on the board. I loved this game. He moves the king. Now we take the bishop. Yo. And my rook is the only piece that is not in the game. So once I play rook to d1, all my pieces are going to be coordinated as well. Remember we spoke about piece coordination? You have to ensure that all your pieces protect each other. Now he plays g6, not bad. He's going to be winning a pawn because my rook is unprotected. So I have to ensure that where I move my knight, it guards the rook. So knight to e3 guards the rook. The knight no longer guards the pawn. The queen takes the pawn, but all my pieces are now active once I play rook to d1. I'm now ahead by 2 points because we're ahead by a piece. The goal is to start trading. He plays rook here. Maybe he's trying to get his rook in the game. We know where the rooks belong. So let's put the rook on the seventh. Unless he wants to do this and then this. I have to be careful. I have to be a bit careful. Let's play c4 actually. I want to be aggressive. I want to be able to check his king with my queen. Like putting my rook on the seven, he has no way to prevent me from doing this. So I don't think I need to rush. Pulls the queen back. Not sure why. Not sure why. Assuming he's gonna block the check with the queen, and then I'm just going to trade the queens and win. Because if I check and he goes here, knight g4 wins the game. So let's play queen to c3. This is completely winning. Or he could block with the pawn. But if he blocks with the pawn, now I get the seventh rank. Yeah, this is over. He did block with the pawn. Now I'm thinking rook to d6 actually to apply some pressure to this pawn. And then if the queen goes back, then rook d7 or just rook d7 in one move. Yeah, let's just go rook d7. Rooks on the 7 is in heaven. My plan is to get both of my rooks on the 7th rank. So taking this pawn followed by rook to d7, both of my rooks are going to be on the 7th rank, and this is just winning. So he plays this move, but that's a blunder because of the knight fork pattern. Knight to g4 hits the queen, hits the rook. I guess this is where he's going to resign. All my pieces, like if you're playing and all your pieces are guarded, my opponent resigns.